Good morning. We are on the record. Today is Thursday, February the 7th, and this is the Architect and Landscape Architect Committee meeting. And the notice of this meeting was put on the board's website on January 31st, and we will get started. I will turn it over to Mr. Thompson. Thank you.
I've got the agenda. Thank you. Just getting organized. Sorry. Thank you. Excuse me. I had to get organized here. Let's see. The board has been called to order. Thank you. Can we get a roll call, please?
The Architect Committee, Rick Thompson.
Present.
Brian Tibbs.
Here.
Frank Waxter. And then from the Landscape Architect Committee, Robert Campbell.
Here.
Blair Parker.
Here.
Yeah. And Frank Waxter. Okay. Frank is absent.
Got a little ahead of myself with the roll call there.
You're good. We have quorum, so that's the good thing.
Okay. So we have the our business this morning for the Architects Committee is some application review. You have those. All right. I haven't had a chance to check these, but we'll look at those, and in order not to hold the meeting up, we'll review those and get those back to you.
Rick, we don't have any applications to review,
Okay.
but we are going to discuss the application itself.
Okay.
It's quite outdated, in our opinion, so we're wanting to talk about some things that could be deleted or reworded or something. We just need to change it.
Okay.
It is on your iPads. The title is it's ARC and LA Committee Meeting for the 6th, and it is 30 pages long, so it does give you an actual example of one to review. And this project, if you will, was done by Wanda and Francis. They are your experts on all applications for architects, as you know. So this was just a good point to look at what we're getting from NCARB for the applications, as well as our paper applications, and review redundancy, things we're asking that are no longer maybe needed. And so the discussion points that they both prepared are the first 2 pages that you see there, and then you have plenty of examples. And of course, those that are the architect members, you review these all the time, so you're very familiar with it. So we want to turn it over to you kind of to walk us through what things you'd like to see, what things are duplicates, so we can make some of these changes.
Sorry, didn't pop on normally. So I do appreciate that the duplications, because I know at NCARB they were going, like, as they call it, the blue cover that has everything. So
Okay. Thank you.
There may be 1 or 2 that I added yesterday afternoon.
Thank you. I'm getting a little technical assistance over here.
Oh, you get the wrong one.
I didn't do that.
Let's go back again. There we go.
Okay. Wanda, would you like to lead this questions or this conversation and let us respond? But since you've gone to the all the work to do all this, and then we can just respond back to you if that's okay.
Absolutely.
You got it.
Sometimes they're sort of grouped, not necessarily. Let's start off with a lot of duplications that are in both the CLARB and NCARB records. And these have just come about over time where we haven't kept up. Our application asks for the NCARB certificate number. And my question was, should we be asking for a number when it still shows on the record? Now, some of these I realize are kind of nitpicky, but they're there. We need to ask for the number when it's on the record itself.
Now, the only reason, here I am, the king of not getting rid of duplication, but I would say that if you put one there, at least you have a little cross-reference, just for the record. I don't know if you have any, if you feel any different about that, but that would give at least the cross-reference back to our application.
Well, I would defer to the staff on this particular item because I'm not having to process all this. I'm just reviewing it. Okay. And yesterday, just as an example, I was meeting with one of our executive assistants, and she was proofreading a letter, and she marked it up really well because of my duplication of statements. So I went, "Oh, I said that how many times?" So, yeah. But I know what you're saying, and of course Frank isn't here, but. Unless there is something that I see that just stands out that we absolutely need, I would tend to agree with staff on these. If it's there,
we don't need it. We don't refer to it.
No,
we don't.
Yeah,
and they could have the licensee maybe type in their wrong number, and then all of a sudden we have an official record that is off a digit if they mistyped it. So not having it there means we're relying on the report that's coming in from one of the two associations to be perfect, because we don't need it for anything else, correct?
We don't need it.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
So,
okay
so we agree with that.
Yeah,
question.
and I'm not being argumentative. That's why we're having this discussion.
No, that's good. No, that's good.
Whatever makes it quicker for you and quicker for us, I think is
and quicker for the applicant.
An applicant, yeah. Streamline.
What about landscape architects? I think your application asks for the council number also. We don't use it ourselves.
Actually, I think I would like to have the number, but we are provided that number, right?
On the report that
On the
comes in
report.
from CLARB, yes.
So then it's not necessary. Duplication.
Right. Okay.
I see no need for duplication.
All right, now we're talking about what is on our application. We're comparing, okay. So it's okay if we don't ask for that number, you're saying?
That's correct.
Yeah, that just as a general comment and looking at it a little bit, on the LA application, we have this summary, but then we have the detail. And do we need, what good does either or do, or you know what I mean? I mean, it seems like you've got a summary, then you provide the exact same information in a detail form. So you either need the summary or the detail. I would like there's a page of summary information that, I mean, Blair, you weigh in, but I don't look at the summary as much as I go, okay, let's see here. Yeah, they did that. Okay.
I'm hearing that we could delete the question about the number, the record number. We can delete that.
Yes, delete that.
Okay. Both applications ask for a list of the state you're registered in. I'm wondering, is that of value to you when you are evaluating applications?
It's a value, but I think the NCARB showing it is enough. We don't have to do it twice.
I feel the same way. CLARB tells us that information, so I don't see the need for the duplication.
Any of y'all allergic to wasp stings or ant stings?
I am.
There's one flying around behind you.
I've got my bee sting kit in my bag here, so.
Great, because he's coming after you.
Definitely warm enough.
Surely it's not that warm. No.
As I moved on down the application, I saw it asked about disciplinary action. It's a yes or no question for them, a when or where. And as I noted on the questions here, we look up that information too, and we know where the details are, and we can get them if you want to see orders or such. But do we need to ask on the application, have you ever been disciplined?
When I was reviewing this, the only value that I see in our application having that is the acknowledgement from the applicant that they have been disciplined. And I think there's some value with that.
I agree wholeheartedly with every program. I think it's a question putting it back on their ethical conscience to let us know. So I would say if you're okay with leaving that duplicity, it has sense. Okay.
And one of the reasons I like it as well is that depending on what their qualifications are, if they're an older applicant that hasn't gone through the education process, and I just like to see that qualification. I mean, they might be registered in 6 states, and of course, we're going to approve them most likely anyway. But it just helps me. Yeah. So I agree. Sorry.
And along those lines too, if somebody's registered in 30 states, and I agree. I think they need to say we've been disciplined. But sometimes when they say, yeah, we've been disciplined, and it was because I failed to renew, and you look and they're in 30 states, and you go, I get it every once in a while, right? So I mean, there's some of that I think has some value on both sides for us.
I noticed in the records, the graduation date for a degree is there. But in other places, we are asked for the entrance date. Does it matter when a person entered college or university? Is that of any value to know when they entered?
It depends on if you were a 10-year student. Or some of us were 8. I don't know.
Yeah. But the record itself gives enough dates for, I think, for you to pick from.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
Delete on both.
100%, yeah.
Delete both?
Yep.
Oh,
20.
No, take off.
Take
Take
it
off
out.
the entry date.
Entry
Yeah,
date.
delete that.
Take off.
We
the
don't need to
entry
ask it.
Good.
It's on the report.
Because we usually have to look at that transcript, and it's not always easy to find. Yeah, that one right there.
And it serves no purpose. Good. 1E.
Is that the one about this? Okay, I had added something in there later. The application asks. Experience. Our application wants to know your experience from the time you graduated until now. Older people, that's a lot of remembering. I don't remember what I did 10 years ago.
But it's also very detailed on NCARB and the CLARB's application, is it not? Okay. Because that's where it becomes difficult for them, and they get upset adding it online because it's so many characters.
Yeah, I say that as long as their NCARB record is up to date.
But in given the fact that we are leaning more heavily on the NCARB jackets, then I don't. It's just more work.
More stuff, yeah. And I will tell you too. I'm sorry to interrupt, Blair. I guess I need to stick something up, but I do get complaints when people find out I'm on the board, and that's the one thing they always bring up, that they have to go back and, like you
Absolutely.
just said, Wanda, their bosses have maybe passed, or and they're trying to dig up things. So
Relationships aren't always great, maybe as they were at one point. So from the landscape architect perspective, I certainly agree. And all this duplication reminds me of going through the medical system and going to one doctor to another doctor, and even though they're connected, they're not really connected because you have to keep filling out that information. It so reminds me of that.
hear a lot of, well, it's in the record, why do I have to write it down again? We hear a lot of that. What did you say for us to do?
Both.
Delete that.
Delete it on both.
On,
Yeah.
on
On both.
experience at all?
Not ask the questions on experience on our applications, because we're going to get it from the record for NCLARB, for landscape and architects.
Clarb.
Further than I
Clarb.
was expecting. Another thing that was brought up to Francis and me one time, do you want to tell about John in 3 years? For what's required?
Okay. In the law, it's required that a person have at least 3 years of experience under a licensed professional prior to registration. Well, we need to get some guidance from you now. Is it the 3 years, or is it for the architects? Is it the AXP? Is it, or is it something else? And that's because that's what they're going by in the record now. So we need to know, which is it? Are we still going by the 3 years, or we need to hear from you?
Well, I
Well-
think they just said no experience at all.
Well, then we need to rethink this a little bit. The 3 years is our law,
Correct.
Tennessee's law. And I don't know how we get around that. We have to adhere to the law. And so that would take precedent over the other. So I think that's a pretty easy answer for now, and unless we go in and amend that.
So on the application, we could ask for at least 3 years of experience somewhere.
Well, I think
Maybe-
we just go ahead and ask for it, because what, are they just going to go back, are they just going to do 3 years, or, I would think, yes, at least 3 years.
What is on the official NCARB or NCLARB record for experience? If it's current, wouldn't it have the 3 years? I mean,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think
that's
on
what I
the
mean.
Back
So
them
we have
to-
at least the 3
experience, couldn't you
years.
just say see in
Yeah.
carb record
Yeah.
Yes.
and go on? I mean, that's what I see on ours a lot.
It is.
I mean,
It's
just, they could put under that, leave that experience there, because you may have somebody that probably, there are people that don't have NCARB records, correct?
Yes.
And so you could leave that there, but I know what we have when we have people with the NCAAS record, and they attach that to it, they just say, see NCAAS record, and that's all they put. And so we don't have to, they don't have to list it twice, we don't have to vet it twice.
And that's an easy technology fix. We can actually say, if your record is complete, your official record's complete, you may type in C record or have an option of that sort. But their record would have the 3 years with NCARB, correct? Or
I think the
NCLARB.
CLARB record is more up to date. NCARB doesn't have the last 3 years, so to speak,
Not
Or
individual
recent.
year, yeah.
not recent experience.
It's just got it whenever you got an NCARB, that's kind of where it stops. I don't know.
But yeah, that's the criteria for getting the
And then it just stops.
Well, I have to update mine, Yeah, we have to. Whenever I,
renew.
yeah, renew.
It's in your profile.
Yeah, it should be in the profile.
Yeah, but that may not be on this record, the profile. I don't.
It may be.
When I submit to another state, I don't. They're just submitting for me in that
Correct. You
format.
don't
So
get
I
to
don't.
see it.
I don't read it. I don't
Yeah.
see it.
We just send,
Where are you?
they just send our card.
I just realized usually on the second page, there's professional history and just the employers are listed. Our record seems to go a little further with evaluations by an employer or. We found that the first few pages in the NCARB record usually tell everything.
Yeah. Well, if we.
That might help right there, professional history.
Yeah, I see
I
it.
think it'll,
And it goes from like this one is dated from 9407 to 4116.
yeah.
So there's at least 3 years in there, I would hope.
So I think we could still keep with that, not having it. duplicated.
IDP, AXP being required, I think there's your 3 years anyway.
Yeah. Can I interrupt one and go back to something? You'd said on your written copy you gave me back, if we go back up to above the what was E on the pad and what's E on your list?
Yeah,
Do we want to cover that before we get too far along? It's E on this.
Yeah.
What about those who graduated back in the 70s in a non-accredited status?
that was something I added because recently I've had at least 2 applications where the person graduated back in those times, and their program wasn't accredited at that time.
Yeah,
But they've
but-
got
but-
all those years' experience, so I don't know how you.
We have language, though, that they have to have so many years of experience to qualify to be considered. And I mean, and I'm just, from memory, I may be incorrect, but like 7 years instead of 3. There's some breakdowns in the rules. I don't remember exactly. I don't have them in front of me.
That sounds correct to me on the architectural side, but
Yeah.
on the landscape architecture side, there's like no wiggle room in there whatsoever, and this is what we've talked about before.
But you gotta have,
With Oksana, with the landscape architects, it's this or not. And he's asked more than once that something be done to make the
Correct.
change.
Correct.
And I don't know who that goes
Those are
to.
going to be rules in the pipeline. Yeah, absolutely. That's a separate issue. Yes.
But we have the ability to review these on an individual basis and make a professional call on behalf of the board. Right.
You
So,
do.
Send them on to you.
yeah, just send them on. I would prefer to see those. That again, that's one of the comments I made earlier. If I get one of those, and they've been practicing since
Right.
1980, and I don't care how many states are licensed in, but if they meet the criteria that we interpret from our information, then I'm good with that. But I'd like to see that.
And I guess I'm still okay because they'll still have an NCARB certificate even if they, are in the 80s or whatever. So if NCARB is giving them that certificate.
Well, no, that may or may not be true. You can apply to a state without an NCARB record directly. Now, that doesn't mean, unless the state requires an NCARB, and several of them do.
Yeah.
Not everyone has an NCARB record.
Okay. So the ones that don't have
So
an
if you
NCARB, we
graduated
have
from
to see
college
it.
in 1956, you probably wouldn't have one.
Unless you're trying to get into another state.
Right.
Well,
right.
okay.
But we don't have any of those cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would defer back to that. Okay, I'm sorry. We can move on.
let me ask you a question about work history, and I don't want to, and I agree with you, once you've got your 3 years, but don't you want to know what they've done in the last? That show up under the scenario that we're talking about?
It would show up in the last 3 years. I mean,
But if they've not done if they've not renewed their certificate, and somebody's not gone in and updated their experience, and it's time for them to renew, but
if they have not renewed their NCARB certificate, it will not be submitted.
What if they're right on the edge? What if they're, because it's every 3 years, right? You renew that, is that right?
Every year.
Okay, never mind. I thought it was every 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it isn't cheap.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right.
No.
Right, and
Well,
we
I tell
require
you,
it, so-
I can tell you to transfer one of these to another state's in excess of $400. So they make their money.
What's that for you?
It's a house payment,
I
buddy.
think 400 just fell out of his pocket. By the way.
Yeah, we're wrong. Strike that from the record. I don't think that's an issue. Yeah, no, yeah. I see it.
I wanted to skip some of these down to the odds and ends. I'm going to come back to the other in a moment, but now that applicants can go directly to CLARB and NCARB to register for exams, they really don't need a thing from us. When they get through, then they can come to us. If they've completed the education, oh, well, they will have completed that. Experience, they will have completed the exam, so they only need experience. We make sure of that. What if someone asks to, they think that they still have to get eligibility from the board to take the exam? If someone goes to NCARB and they do not have an accredited degree, NCARB kicks them back to us. I can authorize that person to schedule exams. Here, my thinking is, go ahead and take the exam. You'll have that behind you. If you still don't qualify for Tennessee, maybe somewhere else, but you'll have that exam. Yes, I'm asking, is it okay if I go ahead and authorize them to take the exam even though their degree doesn't at this time?
I think that taking the exam should be okay. They're paying for the exam, they're taking the exam, and they're taking it at their own risk. If they don't qualify to be licensed somewhere, then, why hold them up? Or if they do qualify, and they may not qualify, like you said, they may not qualify in Tennessee, but perhaps Georgia will accept them. And then we have to go back and decide if they apply in Tennessee, is that going to be acceptable because they're licensed in Georgia? And that's just another step. So.
Have the exam behind them.
Yes, and they still have the exam behind them. And the thing I like about taking the exam the way we're allowing it now is that you don't have to wait all those years from the time you get out of school, because a lot of that's so fresh in your mind. And I'll just refer back to structurals, parts of that test. I mean, that's brutal when you've been practicing and relying strictly on your engineers, your structural engineers, to do that kind of thing. So. I mean, I'm all for letting them take the exam. The rest of it, they'll have to qualify based on our laws.
Yeah.
I think the only added piece to that our office will make sure to be careful with is we are leaving it at their discretion to make the decision to take the exam, knowing that where our laws and rules are. So if they foresee wanting to become a licensee in Tennessee, they can make that decision themselves, and we are not telling them that they will qualify, because it's too early for us to look at all those records. We just need to be cautious not to let them think that taking the exam is going to qualify them for licensure, because we have not reviewed everything to state that. So we will just say the board has the authority to put you to test, read all of the rules and laws to decide if you want to come into Tennessee or not and what you would need to qualify at that time. But at this point, we wouldn't guide them through that.
Right. Would that be a comment on the application? Then
No, these are just
Their emails, their calls.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. All right.
NCARB notifies, well, both
Just
of
giving
us.
them clarification on, what the state would require. I like that.
Say if you meet our other
Yes.
requirements.
Yeah.
And I had one with a foreign degree, and I was about to ask about that one, but he had mistakenly asked Tennessee to give him eligibility, so I didn't have to make a decision about that
Good.
one.
Good.
And that's
But-
consistent then across what we do as engineers, because we may have somebody, I think New York, accepts a technology degree, and they can go ahead and take the national test. They can get licensed in New York, but they could not get licensed in the state of Tennessee because they don't meet our rules. And the risk of not being able to get licensed in Tennessee if you don't meet the rules in Tennessee.
And just down the road, I do know NCARB is looking at trying to help out with more of these foreign degrees. I like I mean, especially RIBA if they're registered in another country. So maybe it'll be easier down the road. They haven't done it yet, but they've been talking about it. Maybe when they come in March, Wanda, maybe you can interact with them too about some of these things. Maybe they can kind of tell you how far down the road it is.
Well, NCARB has adopted other countries, of which we have as well. Canada,
Yeah.
Japan, I think Mexico is still in the works.
Yeah, and that RIBA is one I just, like it's Europe. That one they're still.
Royal Institute of British
Yeah,
Architecture.
Yeah, thank you. Which is.
Sounds so official.
I know. One thing that I've heard about, it'd be interesting what you guys think about the references when you have to ask for references again, and a lot of them bring up, well, we've done all this NCARB, we've got all this, and now we've still got to go back. I don't know. What do you think? I will tell you the honest truth. I really don't pay a lot of attention to references normally, just because, I ask Rick to, I'm not going to ask somebody I don't, I'm going to get a reference from somebody who likes me. I don't know. So I don't know. It's just, what do you think about that?
Maybe.
That is not the case with the engineering committee, I can tell you from yesterday's
we
meeting.
we had a case, or I'm not sure where it wound up, where we had an individual that had practiced so long that anyone that could give him a reference other than a contractor, building official, or an engineer was either no longer in practice or they had expired, died. I mean, and the guy literally didn't have any architectural references.
I remember that.
And I don't disagree that NCARB has a way around that. If you have an employer or previous employer that doesn't really like you for whatever reasons, and they don't give a reference on your NCARB exam, they recognize the fact that it's required, but it's contentious, and they work around that. So I don't have a problem with.
Yeah. To me, it's just one other.
But I think we asked for it, but if they can't do it,
Don't.
then explain why they can't. Is that too much work, or?
I think this, if I'm remembering the example that you're bringing up, that where you do need the three architect references, that's in the statute. So
Is it? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
we
It
can't
is
be
what it
lenient
is
on
then.
it. And when I review the model law for the architects, as well as the engineers, I focus on the references. That's the biggest piece that I actually kind of sit on to make sure that they are the three that the statute requires. Kind of, if they've marked any concerns, I wouldn't approve them. I've sent them back to you. But I agree that they probably won't put someone that they don't like. But I'm relying on what's on the record on NCARB's record, not what they had to retype on their own, because that to me is redundant.
Yeah.
If it's a
because it has to be
statute, then I won't
Yeah.
understand that. But that is something I get a lot is,
Oh,
why
yes.
do I have to do this?
No,
But-
and we have it's been so long since I've practiced, and we've got someone right now that is in that exact situation where we still need the references.
And I made a reference recently for another architect for another state that required that, and I never actually worked with him, but I have worked in the community with him, and so that reference was a reference, and it met the criteria. So I don't know why you wouldn't know another person in your profession.
But you have to ask a question when they don't know and they're not engaged in their profession. How are they really keeping up with what's going on sometimes too?
So okay, that
Okay.
yeah.
It's the statute.
On references in the CLARB record, they have to have references, and they are listed, and if they are current, we accept those. In your example, it's on the second page. Professional reference summary. Details, some dates are given that lets us know that they are current. They're listed here and current, we'll accept these as one of their references.
Good with that.
Wanda, is the goal with this to not ask for it on our application if it's already part of the official record? Where are we going with the question?
Well, it's NCARB doesn't have that kind of list. The references are usually when they first applied for us.
Yeah.
NCARB
They don't keep up with them.
certification, They're old.
Gotcha. So we need it.
They're old.
Yeah.
There are no new references in NCARB. When Sandra asked for an audit, out-of-state registrants may send in a copy of their current license. You know, if they've got a license, they must have met the CE requirement. So I thought, why don't we do that with our re-applicants, because they're required to show continuing education. Why can't we just ask for a current license from that state? At the time, John said that's okay. So I'm wondering if that's okay with you all too, instead of asking the person to send in all those certificates and summaries.
Speaking from experience, I think that's fine.
And then a step further, the records, both of them, show current licenses. So why do we even ask them to send a copy of their current registration? It's in the record. It's in their certificate.
The only question I would have on the continuing education, and I agree, we do the same thing, where if somebody has renewed a license in another state, is it part of your PDH statute or not? I don't know. I'm just trying to, if it doesn't say different, then I don't think, if it gives you the flexibility, I agree, but sometimes those are pretty hard-coded in there about what you have to have, and I don't know what your all says. And
if they're registered in Kentucky, as long as they show that they're still registered in Kentucky, why are we asking for it? That's what the question. Yeah.
All the documents, that just takes up room.
unless you all are different than another state. You know, some states require less continuing education, I know on the engineering side, than Tennessee does. And so but we're pretty much in line with everybody else, so we've kind of taken that.
And we are too. Matter of fact, that there's some that are more stringent. Like my Canadian license is the one that I have to have, like, I kind of agree with what you guys are saying, that if they prove that
Active in another state. Now, let me just be the devil's advocate, and I tend to be the one to look for efficiencies more often, but here my only concern would be, what if most states are moving toward audits or are already in an audit piece, and you've got someone that is renewing in several states that they're licensed in, but has not really been audited and not had to turn in anything on CE just because they've missed an audit period, and we're all renewing them, and we get to 10 years down the road or 6 years down the road to someone asking for CE, and there's been a problem. There's been no proof really turned into any state because they're audited in every state. I mean, I don't know. It's just something worth asking, because I think either way, not being compliant with CE and attesting that you are and opens a complaint in every state if you can't meet it. But if no one's looking at the certificates of what they took, and the statute requires some type of ethics or some type of protection to the public, no one's seeing them, is that a concern?
But on my licenses, 22 of them, they're all different. And some require you to provide the proof that you've done it. And I use my AIA transcripts, which are, you send them a copy of your transcripts. Some states require certificates, which is a real pain. but that's why I always get certificates. Some states just require you to check the box. But interesting what we're talking about, some states like New York and North Dakota, they don't have any requirements. They're just glad that you're practicing in North Dakota. And so, we have 12, they have 0. So, there's always that. Do they meet the requirements in North Dakota? Yes, because they don't have any. And then how does that relate to meeting our requirements without the audit? Since you brought it up, it's made me start thinking about what that means.
And also from a devil's advocate perspective here, what about HSW? Architecture requires all of their hours, health, safety, welfare related, but currently the engineers or landscape architects do not. So how does that work into this overall equation with other states?
And the question, because we audit, is what is the board and this committee comfortable with us requesting to see? Are we okay just with them sending, if they're audited, so they're all attesting to it, but if they are part of the audit pool, are we okay with seeing an active license in 22 states, one state, and is that enough? And if we get it, then it would be the board's obligation to follow up, I guess, maybe on that state's requirements. If it's coming from North Dakota and 0 CE, that doesn't meet our requirement. And at that point, it's some research.
I think that's a problem then. I think they have to meet the requirements of the individual states of which they're requesting to practice.
Right. And they're attesting that they do. So the renewal says, do you attest that you've met the continuing education for Tennessee?
Yeah.
So
well,
we've gotten the yes.
Okay.
Now with the audit, the question is, if I'm hearing right, is what all do we need to see as part of the audit? The certificates? Are you comfortable with just seeing the renewed license in another state?
But if they say yes, they have met our requirements, then we have the random auditing process, which applies to everyone that's licensed in
And
Tennessee.
I would say in an audit, you would get a transcript, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think whenever you do audit, you are requiring that they give you a
Show
transcript.
proof. You're requiring
Yeah,
show proof.
but that's not just,
Not to everyone,
Not
yes.
to
That is
everyone.
just the 10%
Yeah.
or 5% being audited.
Okay, now you can talk to Sandra about all that. This is about on the application. Reapplicants are required to show continuing ed. I was thinking we could put, show this if, and then list our requirements. We could word it in a certain way, could we not?
reapply if they are in another state reapplying, or just?
Another state, in Tennessee, yes, they show they don't have a,
Well, if I understand, like if you're in Tennessee and you're, and you for some reason have to reapply, then you have to show, just like you have to show you've met them. But if you're in Kentucky and you're reapplying for Tennessee, I think you could still check the box or prove that you're up to date in Kentucky and not have to. I know like my other states will say they know my primary residence is Tennessee, so they'll even ask if you're, can't remember, it still like it's a check the box, but it's like as long as you're, current in Tennessee, they're okay with it. So I think even for a reapply, as long as you show that you're okay in Kentucky, just using Kentucky, that should be okay.
Well, unless it doesn't meet our criteria, because some
Saying we
states are
could list it.
reciprocal, and it doesn't matter what your requirement is
So that
in that
first-
particular state. Then
I
you can
gotcha.
apply to the other state
maybe
and
for
say,
the
"I
reapply,
meet my state's requirement." Well, my state is 0, and yours is 12. That doesn't add up. But we're not that way, right?
you have to meet Tennessee's requirements.
Right,
Period.
but some states just are reciprocal. If you meet your home state's requirements, whatever they are, you meet ours. So I don't know. It's what are you suggesting? What would the staff like to see?
I was just trying to get rid of all those certificates
Yeah,
when
I
they
agree.
send in 50 certificates.
Yeah, that's too many.
I agree
too.
with that.
Yeah.
I don't know why you need it on the application.
Yeah, I don't.
It's the reapply. It's that person
the
that
reapply.
hasn't
It's a
maintained
it's a reapply,
Tennessee,
yeah.
so we
Yeah.
need to
Any
make sure that
reapply.
they've been
Okay.
current.
Well, but still, I think on a reapply, when we do it on a reapply, so that we can confirm that they've been through that process. I mean, if they just say, "Oh yeah, we've done it," I don't know what other check we have to,
License is what we're going by. If they're registered in that state, they met that state's requirements, so.
I think that on a, so we think you don't have to have the certificates as long as you show your transcript.
If you have one.
If you have it. So that could,
But what if you don't? What if you're taking these hour-long classes for 24 different days?
Or if
You're
you-
not going to have AI, you're going to have certificates.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you are a member of AIA or some other recognized organization that keeps your transcripts, that's all you need. But if you're not, then you have to submit them because we get so many that don't meet the criteria.
Yeah.
I mean, sketching trees in Italy is nice and fun, but it doesn't meet our requirement, which, we've had those before.
so yeah, if you don't have a certificate, we have no choice. I mean, yeah.
So we're still going to have to put in there if you meet Tennessee's requirements and maybe even list them. If you've met these, then just send us your copy of your license.
I think that's appropriate.
Or we see it in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you don't meet our requirements.
Then you're attesting to your meeting our requirements, which if they are not truthful, then I believe that, is that a felony or? It throws us into a whole different category, so.
CLARB doesn't have AIA.
CLARB has not gotten into the, let me start over. CLARB is, ASLA is involved with CEUs, PDHs, and so on. So it is a little different game than it is with the AIA or NCARB.
They'd still have to show certificates or some kind of proof.
So the architects
the
will help
CLARB
you streamline it, so.
If their CLARB profile shows that they've taken these certified courses, then that should be enough, which that's how you're referring to that as their transcript.
So they could show that, what's it called that you just described?
Well, actually, that's CLARB. CLARB. So when you renew every year, you complete the courses that you've taken, and certified or not. So they have a list of all the continuing education that you have taken. ASLA is the organization that provides the continuing education courses.
Come from them.
It would
Proof
come
would
from-
come from ASLA.
ASLA or others. I mean, there are many landscape architects that take AIA courses and engineering courses and so on. At the CLARB record you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything about continuing ed.
But I'm sure, like you said, if they've joined it and are part of it, they can get their own record, and I think we still need to request it and get it, or get the certificates themselves. We can't skip that. Yeah.
So I'm hearing we just don't blindly accept a copy of their license from another state or even proof from here that they are currently registered. We need something.
Architecture.
So
you've got a record, or they wouldn't have the license in the other state, would they?
but you don't know if it's
That's correct.
you don't know if it's meeting Tennessee though. So we still need some sort of proof some way or other.
I think maybe the way to look at that is start with, give me the minimum, give me the record or give me the certificate or whatever, but maybe a statement on the form that says we may require additional documentation. For some reason there's a flag that gets raised that this person, had that on their transcript, had taken pictures in Italy or something, and whatever it is, you can at least ask. You've got that on the form to ask for more information or more documentation from them at that time. But if their record looks legitimate and all the stuff they turn in looks legitimate, then there's no need to go ask for more information. Or if they do North Dakota, you might want to say, please send me. They send their North Dakota license. You may say, okay, now since they don't require anything, send me some additional where you've met our requirements. And that way you get away from it on every certificate, on every application, but you just use it on an exception basis. That's, that's just a whatever.
The only exception to that, it doesn't apply to Tennessee, is if another state says, if you meet your state's requirements, you meet ours. So
Yeah. So,
we just need to make sure they meet Tennessee's. So,
They attest to that. I think we
Yeah, they
can
attest to
have
that.
them attest to that.
Sure. that's just,
Someone sent an email recently comparing time, a work month, and he was counting months, and he was counting hours. I gave you the entire email. There's a little section in red. If you're seeing color, that's not my highlight, that's the writer's. We're counting 140 hours as a work month. He's counted that way. He's got, I don't know, you'll have to read it.
I go through these numbers, I wonder where the numbers come from. For example, I mean, just reading this whole email, the 4 months, you're in an internship, and we say you have to have at least 4 months in an internship. Well, many interns have summer internships, which do not last 4 months, and so I wonder where that came from. And I think that's something we need to work through ultimately. But I think these are great questions this person is asking. So, as I read this, if I work in a firm that really makes their people work long hours, they're going to put in a lot more than 140 hours. And I think that's where this person's going. He said, I have my experience. I have the time in here because I work long hours. I can prove that, and my company will prove that to you. And that's, I believe, the basis of his question, or her question, whoever's.
I just wanted to say that the 4 months is coming from TCA 625503 regarding practical experience and credit.
code.
It's in the code.
Specifically, A3 provides to receive credit for practical training time, the applicant must be employed by the same employer for a period of not less than 4 consecutive calendar months. The work month is considered to be 140 hours.
I still wonder where that came from. But TCA, which code is that?
622503.
So if that is something that we want to work on or address through statute changes, it's rule, right?
It's a statute.
So that'll be there for a minute.
That'd be hard to do.
Yes.
That'll be tough to do.
Yes.
Well, and I think the way that you interpret that, I don't know how that is, but I mean, to me, it says that you need to work at least 140 months to count it as a month. I mean, we're not going to go down to calculating.
Correct.
You worked 170 hours just so you get to count that as a month and something. I mean, that person's kind of parsing something that I don't think's there, because 140 months is less than a full work. It's 40, 40, 44. That's 160. That's more than 140, isn't it? Right? So it's somebody that may be working 30 hours a week would still qualify under that. And I think that's kind of that threshold. At 30 hours a week, you're considered full-time, if I'm remembering from our insurance providers and stuff. It's 32. It may be 32, but there's some number there. So I think that person's just making something up that's not really supposed to be there. It's just saying that at a minimum, you're going to have 140 hours in the job that you're in that month to consider it a month. And then we go to the next month. And, so that does, somebody that's working 20 hours a week doesn't get to count that as a full month. I mean, I think that's the purpose of that whole documentation. And as far as the 4 months goes, and I don't know, maybe early on there was some transient issues or something when this whole statute was put together where people would work, a month here, a month there, and try to count it as experience. But I mean, that seems somewhat legitimate when you look at it in the overall. You don't want people that are part-time people applying that as if they're getting full-time experience. So that seems legitimate to me. And I think this person's just trying to find some way to speed up the process by a month or two, and I don't think that's license, but anyway.
Well, NCARB requires you to have a specific number of hours. It could take you 1 year or 20. So, if we're relying on NCARB, then that's kind of a moot question. I mean, if NCARB will approve their hours, I don't know. To me, that seems to be the better clearinghouse for that, since we're talking about NCARB accepting a lot of their information.
What does your statute say about that? Does it say NCARB, you count NCARB's record, or does it say 140
We don't say
hours?
that.
Huh?
We don't say that.
Yeah, if your Tennessee Code annotated says that, that may be different.
Well,
So
I throw that out there for that reason for discussion.
Yeah.
So the full item A includes 3 subparts in 625503. A1 provides for the purpose of evaluating practical experience in architectural work, the board may utilize criteria and standards published by the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. 2 provides every applicant shall have not less than 2 years of practical experience in an office of a practicing registered architect. And then 3 provides to receive credit for practical training time, the applicant must be employed by the same employer for a period of not less than 4 consecutive calendar months. The work month is considered to be 140 hours.
Have NCARB in the state law, so that's good. That helps you a little bit. Okay.
The last concern we had was some of these, it's more for the architects because their files, records can be pretty full. And when we send these to you for evaluation, I'm wondering if there's some sheets that we could leave out that are not useful to you. Their first few pages, as I said, seem to tell you just about everything you need to know. But then NCARB puts in the papers that were submitted to get the certificate the first time. How valuable are those to you? Do you need to see those? In our computer system, we'll put the whole record, whatever it is. But I'm talking about what I can email to you to review.
If you email me something to review, it has met the criteria, or you wouldn't be sending it to me. I don't need to see all that. I think it's just I'm not going to go through there and read every single page because it's attested to and it's submitted. So I don't think it's necessary.
Like I typically look at your summary and then look at maybe some. All right, that's kind of how I do it, is look at your summary. So I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but that's kind of how I review it as well.
Beginning on this second page here, those pages that were filled out. Now there is some information on there that's not on the first few pages. The accreditation of the school is not on one of those first few pages. But the rest of it, totally what they turned in when they were first certified. And then there's a verification sheet for each of the exams that they took, the date and the score for each of them. Now Roxana and we have talked about in our computer system, just put in a pass or fail. Well, there will be no fails. They will all pass. And not have to write in all the sections they took and the dates they took. Your record will show that they took all these parts. It sounded like I stuttered.
No.
All these parts and the date they finished. And I would think you just want to know if they passed the test, right?
Right.
All right. Transcript, I would think you may want to see that. And then there's the IDP record. This one causes Francis and me a lot of problems. You want to speak to? The older records are not so clear. That they seem to include any report that a person made for that period of time, whether they reported weekly or monthly or quarterly. And then there's a work history, employment verification. They're just, and usually they're from way, way back. May I leave those out?
Yes.
Thank you. I think we're good.
Let's check the boxes.
Absolutely.
If they meet that criteria, that's what I care about.
And your recap on the first 2 pages or first 3, like
Right.
you said, on the NCARB record is pretty thorough.
And going back to you, Roxana, the ones we get from you.
Yes.
That are.
Now, I check everything.
I know you
so
do.
I'm gonna, because I've got access to it.
But
yes.
Why would I question what you
Correct.
send me?
Correct. I'm with you.
So I'm fine with that.
Right.
If you check the box, send it to me. I don't need to look at it.
I agree.
I trust you totally.
And their records are so concise. No question there.
Was there anything else that you all had? I think we've covered most of what we've got. We will start on these changes. Anything that we are not certain of what our guidance was, we'll bring back to the next meeting. But otherwise, we're going to roll out with making some of these.
Right. I think we covered
Thank
most
you.
everything.
You did.
Okay.
You did. This was awesome.
Yeah. I thank you for doing that. It's good stuff.
So I think we're ready to adjourn whenever you are, Mr. Thompson.
Have a motion?
Did you want to do anything about that proclamation? I'm sorry.
We-
Would you care?
We don't.
Full group.
We'll do that to the
Yeah.
full group.
Okay.
That's just a report. Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed. The committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. We are on the record, Ms. Ballard. Thank
Okay.
you.
The Interior Design Committee meeting now comes to order, and notice of this meeting was on the Architectural and Engineering Board of Examiners and was posted on January 31st, 2019. Roll call?
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Frank Wagster. Kathy Ware.
Here.
McCord, okay. So back in November at the CIDQ national meeting, it was brought to the delegates' attention that we would be having a new definition of interior design. The last one was issued in 2004, so it's been 15 years, and the definition has been updated. And the information was sent to the committee members as well as to the other board members. And what I would like to recommend is that we take the abbreviated definition of interior design and add it to our TCA Chapter 012-04 under definitions of .01. It is one paragraph. I think it would be hard to ask the legislative body to carry the full 4 pages of information. And so that would be my recommendation. And Kathy, do you have comments?
I read through the definition, and of course, I'm not an interior designer, but of course it made sense to me. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into it at the national level, and in the context of the conversations we've been having relative to definitions for engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, makes perfect sense to me that be brought to the board and we discuss it. I have no problem with that.
Are there any other comments from our visitors? Okay. Then I guess I need to hear a
Would
motion.
you like for me to make a motion?
I guess
Since there's only the 2 of us?
Right.
Yes.
I'd like
I
to
hate
make a
Frank's not
motion
here.
that we submit for consideration by the full board inclusion of the definition of interior designer, as Susan stated earlier.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right. The only other business we'll have, I believe Tony will be presenting the memo.
Yes.
And there's actually some information in our TCA handbook that can follow along with that situation, but we'll discuss that when he's here, okay?
Thank you.
Since there's no other further business, suggest that we adjourn our meeting. Yeah. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you. And the full meeting will start at 9:30, so that gives us a quick break.
Yep.
Thank you.
Short and sweet.
I like being on your committee. Have I mentioned that?
All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to the, get my notes out here. Excuse me. To the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners on February the 7th. Notice of this was posted on the board's website on January 31st, 2019. And I think I see everybody pretty much here. I know we've got one that's circling trying to find parking. So let's go ahead and have a roll call, please.
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Present.
Ricky Bursai.
He's on his way.
Grant Minshew.
Here.
Blair Parker.
Here.
Brian Tibbs.
Here.
Rick Thompson.
Here.
Frank Wagster. Kathy Ware.
Here.
Alton Heathcote.
I'm glad to be here and to not incur on time.
Can I get you to bring your mic down too? Thank you.
Stephen King.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Very much. Guests, they are all kibitzing in the back of the room. So I think we see them all. Don, Nathan, Ashley, I think Casey somewhere around here. And then we've got our staff who is ready to keep this train on the track. So that's good. All right. Roxana, any announcements that you know of?
None that I am aware of, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody on the board with any announcements?
Yes, I would like to say that I use this a lot. We were provided this a couple of years ago maybe, and I use this a lot. So just as a reminder that when we make updates, it would be nice to get an updated booklet. And I use this tremendously. So
And you're
thank you.
pointing to just a binder with the
I'm
rules
sorry.
and laws, correct?
Yes, yes.
We're good. I
Yes,
was going to bring that up too because I
Agreed.
couldn't find mine when I was leaving the house this morning. And I wondered if we had them updated. Can we get those updated for the next meeting and give out new ones with a new color?
Good idea.
Orange and blue.
And our thought is also to have the rules and laws in a little folder on the iPads. They're not this time, but that way electronically we can look at them. And the plus now, those of you on the committee yesterday probably realized, with Ashley, is she's bringing her laptop, so she's live researching things. So anytime we've got a question, but yes, we will update and hand binders back out.
And again, I'll reiterate, again, understand what we have for the meeting, but when we're looking at stuff back at the office sometimes, instead of having to scroll through things, we're still kind of in that in-between generation, that paper and computer. We like paper sometimes a little bit better. It's easier for us to find things and tab things and that kind of stuff. So
Interestingly
Both is
enough, I
good.
was going to say just the opposite. I'd rather have a PDF version of it.
And we can have, but we've got access to that as well. It just helps us sometimes. And plus in here, it helps us kind of read stuff to make sure as we're looking. So, and I understand there's some extra effort there and we appreciate that, but it does help some of us over 50s.
Mr. Chairman, may I add one more announcement? Just to brag on one of our fellow board members, Susan and S.K. Ballard Contract Interiors. A hotel that they designed in, I believe, Pigeon Forge. Gatlinburg was voted #1 new hotel in the United States by USA Today. So just congratulations.
Very good. Thank you all. All right. Let the record show that Mr. Bursai is present, please. All right. Everybody get a chance to review the agenda. Are there any changes or additions that we want to have to that? Very good. We will consider it to be set as presented. All right, on my next item here, Robert's Rules of Order. So let me explain how that works. That's just a joke. I understand what Robert's Rules of Orders are. Is there a particular thing we need to do, or is this our time we get our stern talking to about how we do a poor job at making motions?
No, not at all. Although, if the board does see a need for a presentation, we're happy to bring that forth. It is a time every year we need to vote that we conduct business by following Robert's Rules of Order, and would need a motion for the record to do so. But if you have questions on how that is carried out, then Ashley would be the expert to answer any of those.
Very good. So are there any questions about Robert's Rules of Order that we need to bring up? Any clarifications? Anybody? All right.
I have a general question with regard to the whole adjournment motion. Everybody does it differently. Are we just going to say motion to adjourn and that's it and we can all walk away? Or are we going to do that? I'm just curious because I see it 16 different ways during the year.
And again, this is, I'm trying to remember back, and Ashley, you may have a better answer than I do. Robert's Rules of Order, from what I understand, the chairman can call for adjournment at any time. And can call for recess at any time. So I don't know that needs a second. I think the chairman has that ability. I think it's what's a polite way to do it or something to ask for a motion. So you all weigh in on that because, again, they are Robert's Rules of Orders, and I embed my own stuff in there sometimes. So.
Ashley's pulling the official
We're
record,
going
but
to get an answer to this
my
question
gut is
first.
you are correct, but we'll get her to pull it.
I think actually with adjournment, someone has to say, I move that we adjourn, and there has to be a second.
Any other questions on that? All right, so I need a motion that we adopt that we use Robert's Rules of Order in the upcoming year.
Second that motion.
We've got to make one first.
Oh, sorry. I make the motion that we utilize Robert's Rules of Order in the following year.
Second.
Questions? None? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the item passes. Okay. On page 4 of your iPads, you have the meeting minutes from the 2018 board meeting. So I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to go through that. That would help.
I have one correction when you're ready.
All right, Susan, go ahead.
On page 9, under the CIDQ qualifications and the listing of report from the conference, the last line item should read that the ratio of unlicensed interior designers' salary to licensed is very low. So the word salary was important there. So it's average of $10,000 less if they do not have their license. So.
Very much. Are there any other changes to the minutes? All right. So if I could have a motion again to approve with the change noted by Ms. Ballard, that would be great.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the ayes have it. Next, we have professional society reports. So let's just do this. Huh? You're not going to go first? Our parliamentarians going to go first? Okay. Or excuse me, our civics leaders.
We'll talk about Robert's Rules of Order, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. It's always good to be with y'all. Thank you for the opportunity. maybe the reason my colleagues and I are a little bit reluctant to speak. Usually we fight up here to be first, but yesterday was the deadline for filing legislation in the State House of Representatives. So we're all a little bit brain dead, so give us a little more benefit of the doubt than we usually get. And then today will be the deadline in the Senate. So having sort of a nice segue, that sort of gives you a universe of threats and opportunities that will be before us this year in the Tennessee General Assembly. They'll be a little different this time because in the House particularly we have new leadership. I mean, unless y'all have been living in a cave, you know that Speaker Harwell ran for governor and was not successful, and she was not able to run for her House seat at the same time. So the new House Speaker is Glenn Cassida from Williamson County, and there are two significant powers of being Speaker. You get to appoint the committee members and you get to refer the bills, and he has a host of new committee and subcommittee chairs of his leadership team, and we're all sort of feeling as we go on that so they've struggled, just not just that y'all struggled, but they have to ponder how do you start the meeting, how do you end the meeting, is that motion non-debatable, does it take precedence over the others just like y'all do? And you might want to ponder with your Robert's Rules of Order. There are several editions of that, and I'm not sure how other boards do it, but you might want to say either the most current or the 23rd or whichever one they're on, because there's a bunch of them. And in the legislative arena before, that's been the topic of some conversation. So, but yes, yesterday and today were bill filing deadlines. They're fully engaged. They'll be in session as they have been in years past. They'll start on Monday evenings and have committees all day Tuesday and Wednesday, and then a floor session on Thursday, and that'll wind up their week. This is February the 7th. If we're lucky, they'll be done by May the 7th, but that'll be a push just because everybody's new. We also have a new governor, and he had a wonderful quote that I'll always remember. He said, yes, sir, ladies and gentlemen, I am sipping from a fire hose, but the water tastes really good. I thought that was very clever and cute on his behalf. But he's also appointing his leadership team. They got a lot of press for appointing the full commissioners of the 23 online departments, but then you also have to do the deputy commissioners and the assistant commissioners, and it trickles all the way through for all the folks that he has the authority to appoint for. But that's all I have. I'm not as familiar with the board. We always worry about bills called Right to Earn a Living. There's some interest group in legislation that says regulatory authority is always bad and that folks should be able to earn a living. The context might come up in something, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it'd be like shampooing horses or something. There's some odd things that are regulated by state law in Tennessee, and those might be a little harsh. I would hope it would never be any of the design professionals that this board has jurisdiction over. And again, y'all are opinion leaders on that. If you have, I know all y'all are registered to vote and y'all go vote, but you need to reach out because this is a wonderful opportunity. The State House has 26 new members. They know where the Capitol is today. So their learning curve's pretty steep. So if you have someone that you don't know that's in your neck of the woods or maybe a professional alignment, it's probably a good time to reach out to them and say, hi, happy to be a resource for you as you work through this legislative session. That's all I have. Happy to respond to your questions. And for Susan, again, a great shout out. That's a great recognition. I'm tickled for you.
Any questions? Thank you. And I will we'll revisit the version of Robert's Rules at next meeting if that's okay. I don't think it's going to slow us down this meeting, and see if we want to put that. That's good advice, though, to put that in there.
Always refer to the most current version.
Yes, ma'am. I think. Okay. Now, Casey, are you ready?
I'm Casey Anderson with the It has been a long week. With the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. I thought Robert's Rules of Order were just because your name was Robert. Just kidding, just kidding. It has been a busy week, a busy month so far. There is a bill out that specifically is set up to expand the Right to Earn a Living Act. But I've talked to the Chairman Daniel, who's the new chair of GovOps, on the House side. His intent is not to affect any of the professions represented here. But I think it will. We do need to at least be aware and keep an eye on the changes, because they're still reacting to the North Carolina dental case and regulatory boards and such. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that. We are probably it's several hundred at this point, caption bills we're watching right now. A couple of other things that have come up. The privilege tax is back on. There are a lot of people itching to take care of that. We have always been supportive of that, and with the caveat that we want to make sure that that doesn't force us into a tax on professional services at any point. But do know that that is back on the agenda, because I know that comes up every year at Renew Your License time up here, whether or not people renew their license because they've got that extra $400 fee that comes out that goes into the general fund. There are a couple of transparency bills that we have had some meetings about to make sure that they don't affect the way that particularly engineers, architects operate. Because I do think that at some point, when you get too in the weeds on sort of that piece, the health, safety, and welfare, we always have that first and foremost. There are a number of bills that that we are following that affect municipalities, but public health, safety, and welfare kinds of things. So I think it's going to be a really busy session. One thing that I have spoken with Chairman Daniel about, because we've talked about it for the last couple of years, is the decoupling piece that the Engineering Committee keeps talking about endlessly. I think you all who are not on the Engineering Committee probably know plenty about it as well. So decoupling the exam, the PE exam, from the experience is something that has been an active conversation. I think it's what I've discussed with the chairman is, let's not look at that this year. Let's make sure we get it right. And look at doing that next year. In addition to that, I think that we are going to need to re-engage in a conversation about the master's degree in engineering without the undergraduate degree. I've been approached that we amended a bill 2 years ago that allowed for that with 20 years of experience, as you all probably recall. That bill sunsets this year. Which we did on purpose so that we could continue that conversation. And there are at least one of our engineering programs in the state would like us to revisit that and really have a deep conversation about what that means, particularly for their master's program and the people who are in it. So I have agreed to with them, like, let's take our time on this and really make sure that we do it correctly and the way that makes the most sense in terms of your registrants and public health, safety, and welfare. So happy, I'm sure there are 1,000 things I'm forgetting to tell you, but happy to answer questions about any of that. And then one thing I want to bring up, we always, twice a year, do a 10-week course, 3.5 hours per week on Monday nights, that is a PE exam review. It's such a great program, and we did not have enough registrants in that this year to make it a viable program, so we canceled it. This week I've heard from 4 people, and I know there are probably more, who didn't find out that they were eligible to take the test until now, and we had pulled the plug on that program by the time they learned that they were eligible to take the exam. And so we're scrambling and trying to do maybe a smaller version of that class. But if there was a way that I don't know, perhaps we could have some dialogue about the timing of all of that to make sure that we're not cutting people off. We want to give them that opportunity, because I think the numbers that we have, at least in the last 4 years since I've been around, it's astonishing, the pass rate of the people who really sit down and go through that with the PEs who are specialists in those certain areas. So I think it's a really valuable tool for them, and I would hate to lose that opportunity going forward just because of timing and the way we have to make those decisions. So I would appreciate some thought on your end about how the timing of those alerts that you're eligible to take the exam happen.
Ricky?
Yeah, I'm thinking that February the 7th, today was the deadline for approving applicants to take the PE test. When does the class normally start?
We run the class always 10 weeks prior to the exam. So that last week we go 10 weeks out, which is, I'm not good at math. It's soon. I mean, I don't know if it's
almost the same time.
Right.
Close.
Right.
Okay, so maybe it's just coordinating those two dates and waiting to cancel it until after the.
Yes, and that may be on my end. I just didn't know that
Yeah,
was, you know.
but yeah, okay.
Alton.
Thank you, Robert. Casey, do they offer like, if somebody registers for that, do they know that they can get a rebate in the event that they're not authorized to sit for the exam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but it's ours is a tenth of the amount of money it costs for the national opportunities to do some of those things. So ours is really a very reasonable price. But I think there's young people are nervous to put that money out, and for several, particularly for some of our people who are in state agencies, for example, taking the test, they have the opportunity to get that refunded if they pass the class. So for them, they're putting the money out. They know they can get it back if they pass, but that's for young. I think for young people that what is it? $300 or $400 or something like that for that 10-week class. That's a lot. I think that's a heavy hit for them to not know that they have that. That they will be taking it.
It's a lot of cable TV.
Or at least a month if you have the full package.
And let me speak to that real quick too. We've had this discussion. By the nature of the application deadlines, we're kind of forced into a pretty tight window to approve. And the problem also exists is we get them when they are completed. And, you're staff's waiting for that one reference or waiting for that one piece of information to turn them over because when she gets that 15 or something, boom, here they come. And I get them on a somewhat regular basis. Then it's up to us to do that. And sometimes we get behind too because we, have day jobs, but I think that we can talk maybe internally about sending out 10 at a time or something, and the stragglers are the stragglers, and that really does hurt us because you just have so many pieces of paper sometimes that they have to get, and they don't get it all there in time, and then we're left trying to approve 50 of them in a 3-day period or something, and that does get to kind of be a little problematic. So
I'll tell you the other difference, I think, is I've been here, 4.5 years, 4 years, I'm not 4 or 5. We have not had to cancel a class in this whole time, but we, in the past, prior to the change in the public record, open records notice, prior to that, I always had a list of those who did not pass the exam the last time, so they would get an email from me with the opportunity a notification from me. I don't know if I sent it snail mail or email. I don't even remember because I didn't physically do it. But an opportunity to take, because they're already eligible to take the test. So I think we've never had this before where we don't have a pool of people already in the pot. So we always have last-minute people coming to sign up to take the class who would be those first-time takers because we always had a pool of people taking the class who had not passed it in the past, so they weren't waiting on notification. So perhaps that's why it didn't come up before. Does that make sense?
Is that just because it's not the right to know?
I don't know. There's just a change in
The
policy.
downloadable reports are no longer on our website, just to make sure that nothing's hacked in. You actually, anyone that's a resident of Tennessee would be doing a public records request for any type of data. And so that would apply to if you're marketing or for a course or to send material or whatever. It's just legal requires a public records request, and then you tell us anything you want, and if you're a Tennessee resident, it goes to you.
Maybe that's part of this.
It is. It doesn't
fine.
occur
That's
to me
fine.
to do those things. So,
Okay.
the last bit of news is we had a tremendous response to our scholarship, our Tennessee Engineering Foundation, ACEC scholarships. I know some of our chapters do scholarships as well. We had a really great response from a much larger variety of schools this year. And just for public record and anyone who does those scholarship pieces, I think some of it was in addition to the deans this year. I sent it to all of those student success officers all of our universities at this point have these student success centers, which I learned about from the presentations at this board meeting. And they tend to know who are those students who will go the extra mile or who really need it. And so we've got a bigger pool than we've had in the past, and I'm really encouraged by it, in a much more diverse set of applicants. So I thought that was great. I appreciate everything you all do.
That Engineers Day on the Hill, March.
Engineers Day on the Hill is March the 12th.
Okay.
We are also having a reception jointly with AIA, AGC, and ABC on the 5th at the Musicians Hall of Fame right up here. And there are a couple other things on our agenda that I'm leaving for Ashley because they're bigger priorities on their side. But you all are all welcome to join us and are invited to the legislative reception. The engineers are separating our Day on the Hill from that just because we've got the two groups and it we're going to try it this way for a year. So we will have some people on the Hill on the 5th and on the 12th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Ashley, Don, are y'all going to flip forward? Okay.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Cates, Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. I'm going to echo Nathan's words of brain fried. So right now we're just going through the legislation that has been filed to see what will be impactful for us. We've already flagged a few items. Number one item that we are supporting, Casey mentioned we have some other items, as architects supporting the built environment in Tennessee and preserving historic structures. And so we are working with the coalition. The National Land Trust is kind of leading it, and we're helping to build additional coalition members to support this legislation. And it's focusing on Main Street Tourism and Revitalization Act. And we're really looking at the rural areas, trying to help revitalize those areas and taking vacant buildings that are standing still and crumbling and trying to invest or have someone incentivize people to invest in those buildings. And so what we've done is we've developed a multi-tiered structure for historic tax credits. We've introduced the legislation where it would be 10% in Davidson and Williamson County, 20% in Hamilton, Knox, and Shelby, and then 30% in any of the counties that are outside of those identified counties. And in addition to that, if those small towns and cities have gone above and beyond to be able to be designated Main Street districts, they will get a 5% bump. So they'll end up being able to get a 35% state tax credit on top of the federal historic tax credit. And so we just see a lot of structures that need to be saved. And if not, they're going to be torn down and either made into a parking lot or a gas station. And so that's something that the architects is near and dear to their heart. So we're working on that, which will be a steady climb. Just keep going. And our Day on the Hill is going to be on March 5th. We are going to have the joint reception going on that evening. And so it'll be a good day. We're also looking at trying to identify tours for in the afternoon of buildings throughout downtown that we can take some tours of. So we welcome any and all to participate. I'm happy to send some information out on it. Other than that, we're getting ready for our conference that's coming up in July and starting to plan that, and it's going to be in Knoxville. So we're excited about it, July 17th through the 19th. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Actually, I don't know, you may know this already, about 2 years ago, the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development put into their Community Development Block Grant Program downtown facelift, downtown not streetscape, but it is more of a building program where they provide grants to property owners to upgrade and improve the fronts of their building, the facades of their buildings. A lot of people have capitalized on that. They're small grants, but they're meaningful grants, but it's that exact same initiative that you were talking about in rural areas.
In rural areas. Well, I think they would also be able to use that grant, apply for that grant in addition to the state tax credit as well. So that would be additional funds to help them.
Did y'all know about that program?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes,
It could be
sir.
something else that you could capitalize on.
Yeah, it'll be used similar to the way you apply for the federal historic tax credit. You have to go through the Tennessee Historical Commission. Patrick McIntyre is the executive director, and so they have been reviewing the legislation and they're comfortable with the legislation. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we're not leaving our hidden treasures in the state behind.
I like that. That's a good name. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right, Don?
Good morning. I'm Don Baltimore, representing Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy. I have nothing much to say except we're waiting for all the legislation to be introduced to review it, which means for a busy couple of days. Also, that we're willing to support what the board seeks as an initiative, and also with the other professional associations. And we see deregulation as a major concern this year that we will all be facing. And other than that, we're just ready to work with you and the associations, as I said, on Capitol Hill. And one other point, the president of our association is a proud new mom as of January 30th. So, young boy. So we're celebrating that as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any questions for Don? All right, thank you very much. Oh, okay. We've got an addendum to the Professional Society report.
I just got so excited about the historic tax credit legislation. I forgot to tell you all, if you haven't seen the news, that Belmont is opening up a Bachelor of Architecture program. So we're excited about that, and I'm happy to speak with you all maybe about doing some outreach or going and meeting with them as a group, just to introduce ourselves and to support the program. So it's exciting news.
All right, we'll switch gears to our legal case report, which begins on page 11 of your iPads.
Good morning, board members. I will be presenting the legal report this morning along with Sarah Page. She has a couple of items on here. The first item on the legal report today is item number 2018-074491. This is a professional engineer. In this case was reviewed by Steve King and Blair Parker. In this case, the complainant had filed a complaint against the respondent, alleging the respondent stamped a design plan for a subdivision but failed to include a stormwater plan except for a simple silt fence. The complainant alleged that this failure resulted in her property flooding after construction of the subdivision began in December of 2017. The respondent did submit a response to these allegations, indicating that construction drawings and associated stormwater calculations for the phase of the project at issue were prepared by his firm and approved by both the city where the subdivision is located and the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. He also indicated that his stormwater calculations included an analysis of runoff from pre-developed versus post-developed conditions, as well as indicated that diversion ditches, enhanced riprap check dams, sediment traps, mulch berms, and silt fence have been utilized to control stormwater and erosion while the project is under construction. Like I said, based on the nature of this case, I did send this for review and an investigation. In response to the investigation, the respondent provided construction drawings, final plats, and permits. These items were sent to Steve King for review, who found that the documents did contain detail on erosion, and he also noted that he did not find any engineering issues. He did, however, indicate that he found that the respondent stamped landscape design sheets associated with the project, so based on that, I also sent it to Blair for review, and it's my understanding that Blair did not have any health, safety, welfare concerns. There were no mitigating factors or aggravating factors here, so the legal's recommendation is to close.
All right. Any discussion by the board? Yes, sir, Ricky.
Ask Steve and Blair. So the complainant alleged that flooding occurred as a result of this. Is that even though the plans appeared to have everything it needed in the way of calculations, and could you tell what the reason for the flooding was?
This was a multi-phase residential development, and the engineering firm it appeared to me had the appropriate erosion and sediment control design details. They did the SWIP with T-deck, and where this water discharged was into an existing residential area that contained very large lots. And I deal with a lot of this kind of situation at my work, and it's very difficult to determine what caused the problem. Oftentimes, it's the engineer can do a erosion and sediment control plan that's not appropriately implemented and phased by the contractor. It could have been that there was some additional water that came off the site, but I guess my charge was to review the engineer's design. I couldn't determine that there was an issue with the erosion sediment control plan. It looked, the complainant's accusation was that there was no design. Well, there was a very detailed erosion sediment control plan.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, have a motion.
Can I say one more thing? It bothered me a little bit, and I guess it didn't Blair, but it bothered me that we have an engineer that's stamping some drawings that aren't engineering. So I thought we at least ought to talk about that.
I'll weigh in on that. As I understand our law, if you are educated to provide a landscape plan in this case, then you can prepare a landscape plan and stamp it. In this case, this specific case, the plan was prepared based on minimum requirements that the town provides. So this was a multi-phase subdivision, and basically they were putting in street trees around the at the street side, which in I believe every case was the high side of the overall property. So it didn't take a whole lot of design per se. Where I questioned, and it was an interesting conversation that Ashley and I had. I questioned putting trees in an easement that will have easements, or that will have utilities. And she made a phone call to the municipality, and I believe the municipality said, yes, that's pretty standard of this municipality, so it was allowed. I agree with your concern, but I didn't see anything that was so different than maybe a landscape architect would have done if you are providing just the minimum requirements of design for the subdivision.
All right, any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we take the recommendation to close the complaint.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the ayes have it. Second, number 2, please.
Item number 2 is case number 201808. 0021. This is a professional engineer. This person's registration expired on October 31st, 2016. When reapplying, they indicated in their affidavit that they did practice engineering on an expired license and explained by a letter dated September 30th, 2018, that in August of 2018, his firm's Tampa office received a request for a proposal for engineering requiring a PE license in Tennessee. The proposal was submitted in September, and on September 10th, 2018, he sent a letter to the board requesting reactivation of his license, which he believed was on inactive status. He provided certification that he had met the CE requirements, had not practiced engineering in Tennessee, and submitted the biannual registration fee. On September 12, 2018, his firm received the purchase order for the project and shortly thereafter began technical services on the project. After conferring with members of the board on September 24, 2018, however, he realized that his license status had changed from inactive to invalid around April 30th, 2017. He advised that the work on the project was promptly stopped, the client was informed, and no documents had been sealed. Mitigating factors here are that it was self-reported. He did stop the work upon realization that he didn't have the license, and the client was informed and no documents were sealed. There were no aggravating factors. Legal's recommendation is authorize a formal hearing and authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for practicing on an expired license. Respondent is also to take and pass a laws and rules examination.
All right. Any questions from the board? Question at all? Do I have a motion? Second. So we got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion? And this is all in line with our standard penalty matrix that we have?
Yes.
Okay. So discussion, I don't see any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Item number 3, please.
The third item is complaint number 2018-086-091. This is an engineer who entered into an agreement to surrender license with another state's Board of Licensure for Professional Engineers for failure to provide proof that he had met the continuing education requirements claimed on his license renewal application. There were no mitigating factors here. The aggravating factor would be that the respondent did not self-report that he had entered into this agreement to this board. Legal's recommendation is a letter of warning.
Questions? An observation or a question for me is, so he's, anytime that there is a change in status, they are required to report it to other boards, I believe is correct. Is that not? Don't have a license in another state, or if you've had some issue, you're supposed to report it.
Correct.
Was the surrender of the license driven by the regulatory agency? And is it something that the board would normally take action on too, other than just a letter of warning?
I don't think so. As for your second question, your first question, can you repeat that?
He agreed to surrender his license for some reason. Was the reason? Was that what it was?
Yeah, the reason was he had failed to provide proof that he had met the continuing education requirements claimed on his license renewal application,
Rather than
and that for the other state board.
Okay. Rather than just getting the continuing education, he surrendered his license. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Chairman, just a clarification. You said we're supposed to notify any changes. I don't think that applies.
That was a question. I didn't know if that's what.
Okay. Well, I want to respond to that with, I guess, a comment and maybe a question. We're not required to notify anybody that our license is inactive or anything like that. This is strictly from a regulatory or a complaint that's required. I mean, I've got 4 licenses that I didn't renew, and I don't think that's not necessary.
No, and I probably should have phrased that a little bit differently. This was obviously a disciplinary action that board took against him, and he chose to surrender his license rather than to remedy that discipline in some way. And those disciplinary actions are supposed to be reported, which he didn't report to us. And my only heartburn with the whole thing is not knowing, and this seems kind of a minor offense to turn your license in for. I mean, make up 2 continuing education hours or whatever it is and keep your license. It just doesn't pass. And I'm not disagreeing with what you have down here. It's just it doesn't pass. And then he doesn't report to us that he has a disciplinary issue. That starts to get a little goofy in my opinion, but I'm one opinion. All right. So do I have we don't have more discussion. Do I have a motion on the item?
Make a motion that we go with the attorney's recommendation on letter of warning.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? And the ayes have it. Item number 4.
Item number 4 is complaint number 2018084-241 against a registered architect. As you can see, this person does have some disciplinary history. The complainant here was a codes official. They filed a complaint alleging the respondent submitted plans for a restaurant to the Building and Codes Department of the relevant city, but the plans were not up to code. Specifically, the plan showed seating for more than 50 occupants, but the respondent labeled the plans as Group B business occupancy, occupant load of less than 50 persons because of divider walls, 3 42-inch high walls with 2 4-foot wide openings, separating the 2 dining areas in the restaurant. Showing an occupancy of 41 persons on one side of the divider and an occupancy of 44 on the other. The complainant indicated the respondent was advised of this issue, but he received resistance from the respondent, who has refused to provide a sealed set of construction documents. In addition, the complainant also advised that there have been many ongoing arguments over the years with this respondent trying to undermine the codes and disregard the safety of the public. In response to these allegations, the respondent disputed the complainant's claim that the plans weren't up to code and indicated that per the December 2015 version of the Tennessee Reference Manual for Building Official and Design Professionals, the occupancy classification as defined by the 1985 edition of the Standard Building Code as it pertains to seal exemptions, a restaurant with less than 100 occupants shall be classified as a business occupancy. Based on the nature of these allegations, the response, the complaint, and accompanying documents were sent to Frank Wagster for review, who noted that the respondent appeared to be in violation of this board's rules. He also noted several references pertinent to the complaint. He found that per the 2012 IBC section 303.3, the proper occupancy type for the building/restaurant submitted was assembly group A2. Given this, the proper plans for the restaurant must include a full set of construction documents, including civil, architectural, structural, HVAC, plumbing, fire protection, and electrical drawings and specifications. Mr. Wagster also found that the respondent's attempts to undermine the requirements of the building codes in effect and the law show a lack of concern for the public safety. There were no mitigating factors here. The aggravating factors are undermining codes and law. The recommendation is authorization for a formal hearing and authorization of a civil penalty in amount of $3,000. The respondent is also to take and pass the laws and rules examination.
Very good. Do we have any questions? Are you getting ready to ask a question?
Have we seen this individual here before?
There is a disciplinary history. As you can see up there, 2015, there was an $11,000 civil penalty paid in full in 2016 per the terms of an issued final order after a formal hearing.
Mr. Chairman, given that Mr. Waxter is not here, I make the motion to accept his recommendation and recommendation of the legal department, as noted.
A second.
Any questions on the motion? Very good. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And the ayes have it.
Members of the board, I have two cases with you today, but I have a small personal announcement I wanted to make to you all. I know I'm not your lawyer formally anymore, but I have enjoyed working with you all over the years and obviously have clung to the few cases I still have. But fortunately and unfortunately, I keep telling everyone, I have accepted a new position. I am going to be the attorney for the Rutherford County School System, and tomorrow is actually my last day with the department. I'm very excited. One of my very best friends was in this position before me, so I know fully the ups and downs of what I'm getting into, and I'm very excited to kind of pursue that avenue. But with that being said, after this, I'll make sure to send all of you an email with my personal contact information. Please stay in touch if I can be of any help, or just because you're in Rutherford County and want to know where to eat, anything like that, let me know. But I wanted to thank you all very much for working with me, and I'm sad to go, but excited for the next adventure. So. With that, that kind of shows you with these two cases, I have no dogs in these fights. So whatever you all feel, I'm sure that these cases will go to the capable hands of Ashley Gino following my recommendation, except for this next one, which I don't know where it will go. I'm not going to lie to you. Some other lawyer will have to take this case if it's not settled, but that is okay. Number 5 on the list is 2018-08-2401. I took this case over due to a conflict amongst our legal team, which is why I have it. I had the assistance of Ricky Bursai in looking at this case. This was a matter where an engineer was asked to do a structural report. There was a contract pending on a property, and they wanted, as far as negotiation of the condition of the home, a report on the structure of its suitability. The dispute here doesn't come down to the quality of the review necessarily, but it goes to the heart of producing a report. The complainant in this case says that the whole point was to negotiate for a written report that they could use in their negotiation, but that respondent continuously failed to produce that report upon requests. The respondent ultimately agreed to reimburse the fee that he collected on this matter to the complainants as a result of the delay, but he also failed to do that until the complaint was opened, unfortunately. But it was, in fact, paid back. As a result of this delay, the complainants had to hire a second PE so that they could stay within the negotiation window that they were under. Respondent responded and stated that this was a favor from a real estate agent, and that he was just supposed to do a site study, and that there was no agreed-upon timeline, so that he was just simply unable to perform on complainant's schedule because he was not aware there was one, and that he did reimburse the complainant. I did want to note that we do have a history here. Normally we wouldn't indicate closed with no action complaints, and I would caution when I say this to say we did ultimately talk about this case and decided to close it without action. However, the facts of a complaint that we had last year, or in 2017 rather, were fairly similar to this, in which the complainant claims they were supposed to get a written report, and respondent claimed it was a verbal report to a contractor and that there was never an agreement for a written report. There were other mitigating factors, I think, in that last complaint, which we tended to believe the respondent, and so that was closed. But I did want to note that just because the facts were similar. So as a result of that, we do have two mitigating factors. The respondent did reimburse the complainants, and no claims that the structure experienced issues were identified as far as the quality of the review. The aggravating factors were that we do have a fairly eerily similar complaint in a close period of time, and we also have that there was still a harm to complainants because they did have to hire a second PE. So reimbursed or not, they did ultimately have to take the time to recruit a second PE. Ricky, obviously you can speak on this, but I think we ultimately decided that a $500 penalty for failing to recognize the health, safety, and welfare of the public seemed to be a worthy citation. We could discuss the possibility of competence and negligence, but those are fairly hefty words in the law that would maybe that not producing a report would maybe be challenging to rise to the level of saying someone was incompetent or negligent or grossly negligent. So we decided that public health, safety, and welfare may be a better bucket for this violation.
Ricky, you want to say anything?
This was a really unresponsive respondent. In this case, and I felt sympathy for the claimant, because when I read the material, she asked for the report. It did not come in the time that she had wanted it, even though it says here there was time. I think the information that I had to read said that when she requested the report, it did not arrive. There were numerous emails and phone calls that went unreturned, and so and at the time that I read the material, the respondent said that they mailed the check back after having forgotten to mail the check back, but there was nothing from the claimant complainant to say that they had received the check. So there was nothing there. So I just felt like that was hard to ignore all of that and say that that what we were dealing with should be acceptable for the public.
Questions? My only comment, well, go ahead, Kathy. You were getting ready to say something?
This isn't a comment on the case, but this speaks to the issue that I brought up several times of the fact that the only real penalty to this person is going to be if it is made public that they have been found in violation and fined by the AE board, such that it penalizes them in the marketplace. That's the real penalty. $500 is not that much money, but if others in the general public knew that this registrant had been found in violation and penalized accordingly, then you would hope the free market would do its job and that they would suffer financially or some way in the marketplace. But the only way this stuff gets out is if we have an active communication with the public, which used to be a website and used to be a newsletter and used to be publications of fines and violations, etc. And I just implore this board to take it seriously that we don't have public communication anymore, because we just don't. And this is the only way that people are really penalized. If one of us were found guilty of something like this and our client base found out, we would lose business. That's how people actually take these things seriously. And a $500 check to a professional just really isn't a lot of money. I mean, most of us sitting here in this room would be much more embarrassed than we would financially hurt by a $500 check. So I just really want to go on record, and I'd even ask that it be please put into the minutes for the next meeting, that I think that we need to have a formal and regular communication with the public, either on the website or a newsletter or something that is sent to registrants that makes people aware of the findings of our legal cases. And thank you. I'll shut up.
Not to, I know newsletter is a separate issue, but just to at least have it out there, we do have a disciplinary action report that is produced on the website that includes every fine and penalty and violation that is assessed on a month basis, but it is a collection of everybody, and I know that's not going to the heart of what you're saying, Kathy. But
yeah, and I appreciate that. I know it's out there, but nobody's going to find it. Nobody's going to find it, and I get the ones for all the other states that I'm registered in. Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, all of them produce a quick and easy, regular written communication to me. And one of the few things that I actually look at, because I don't read the articles on what's required in the engineer's seal, I kind of know, but I flip it over to the back page and I look at every single registrant who's paid a fine or been issued a letter of warning. That's how I know who in other states are being found guilty of these violations, and we're not doing that. And I'm not going to go to, I know what you're saying, it's out there, but I'm not looking at it. And that means very few people probably are seeing it. And the people that we're trying to protect, most importantly, the public.
I'll make a quick comment just on this part of it. I hope we're not setting a precedent by every time that I forget to do something for somebody that I have to have a complaint filed on me. There are multiple times that we all get busy. Obviously, there was not a contract. There was not even a formal proposal. This was a word of mouth thing where it seemed like two ships passing in the night, and they decided to enter into some sort of, hey, I'll try to take care of that. And I know we all have those situations that happen to us in our personal and professional life where we say, I'll get to it, and then memories and other things are bad. I mean, that's one of the reasons we have email, and I cling to it, because usually when I have an email, I have to purposely delete it to forget about it. Sometimes, again, I just hope we're not setting some sort of precedent for that. Number two, I'm not confident that forgetfulness, and I'm going down that same path, is a in our code anywhere. Although I understand the rationale, I don't understand exactly what basis that we're going back to this person to say you violated our penalty. And I will push back slightly on the I agree with you on communication. We need to have that, but people that don't meet deadlines, people that don't keep their word, that consistently do that reputation does get out in the public domain. Realtors, I mean, they said they talked to a realtor contractor. That does get out in the public marketplace, and you hear it when you call up a friend to say, who should I use to do this? Well, don't use that person because they're not responsive. I think that in local communities, it doesn't get out into the universe at large, but in local communities it does. And that's how, Better Business Bureaus, all kinds of people do that. But I go back to my original point of, I hope we're not setting a precedence that forgetfulness has now become part of our code, because I guarantee you, I get a phone call once a month saying, oh, when are you going to have that? And I'll go, well, you didn't tell me when you needed it, or crap, I forgot about it. I mean, and it was just a flippant conversation between two people. So anyway, that's my comment and concern. Go ahead, Ricky. I'm sorry.
And those are great comments, both Kathy's comment and yours. And this wasn't an easy thing for me, because exactly what you said. I would hope that somebody didn't start a complaint against me every time that I forgot to return a phone call. So it won't hurt my feelings if you don't think this passes muster for a fine. But it felt like a pattern was there, and the attempts to get this service taken care of were enough that I didn't feel good, at least not getting it to this point and having us discuss it. But yeah, your concern is real, that it doesn't grow into some pattern.
I agree with Ricky. I think in this case, maybe a letter of warning or caution could be appropriated as well. I know we had discussed, a desire to have folks have written engagement letters, but I know that's not always how the industry operates. But perhaps in the letter we can include, just as a recommendation, you may want to write down these things.
Alton?
I think forgetting to do something that a friend or an acquaintance asks you to do to help them with that may seem sort of insignificant at the time is understandable. I think agreeing to pay them back, to reimburse them, and then forgetting to do that until somebody files a formal complaint against you, my guess is that probably the person that he was supposed to pay back may have reminded him of that a time or two, may have even sent him statements or requests, and I don't know that may be extenuating circumstances, but that would be something that I think would be difficult for me to forget. If I'd agreed to pay somebody back, that would be foremost on my mind, and I would want to get that done. And apparently this individual was either reluctant or just refused to do it until they got the complaint.
All right. So I think we've had a good time of comments. Anything else? So I need a motion.
Make a motion that we accept legal counsel's recommendation to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for failing to recognize the health, safety, and welfare of the public with a letter of caution about their future doing favors, because no good deed goes unpunished. So,
I want to make sure I get it right procedurally. The motion is for a letter of caution, or at least a warning to be included in the consent order with the penalty? Okay, no problem.
they've done this twice.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know.
Cool. Just making sure.
Do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any question on the motion? Yes, sir, Rick.
Is there a difference between, I think, a letter of caution and a letter of warning?
So with a penalty, it would be a consent order, and a lot of times I understand where Susan's coming from. You want to make an express statement to let them know, and that is no problem. We can include in the consent order a sentence that says, the board, strongly urges you to, uphold your obligation to the public and maintaining services and providing documentation. And so we can include that, what we would have put in a caution letter, we can put in our consent order so that the penalty still goes. But you're right, our letters of warning in their own would end the case without a penalty. So, it's very common to combine them, so that's no problem.
Thank you for clarifying it.
Of course.
Yes, we do have a motion. We have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I have to leave. On the next case, I defer to Rick. It was a case that I reviewed with him as well.
Okay, very good. Well, be safe. Hopefully you're going to beat the rain here in a minute.
Yeah. See you, Brian. See you in March.
All right, this final case is a represent. I am bringing back, I notice now I have a little typo in the number there. It should be 2016-053951. We'll clean that up for the minutes. This is coming back again due to a formal settlement request from opposing counsel. And since I am making a grand exit, I wanted to make sure I got before you with that final formal settlement request before I exit and this case gets transferred to a different attorney. This case has been reviewed by both Mr. Thompson and Brian Tibbs. This complaint was sent to us by a competitor indicating that the respondent had performed work outside her competency. In this case, our respondent is an engineer, and the respondent engaged in projects where she stamped architecture sheets for small studio apartment buildings and aimed at a college population in a small town around here. Originally, this case was with Matthew Reddish, if you can remember back that far. And the case, when we brought the case up, Rick had looked at it, and he noted a number of deficiencies. I think with our major concern being a set of stairwells. When you looked at the plans, the stairs didn't have landings, and the rails were missing. They were very primitive stair design. As a result of that, we assessed a $6,000 penalty, which was $750 per each architectural sheet sealed. After that, the case was transferred to me. The attorney asked that a second architect take a look at the case so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page, knowing that this would be a kind of a complex litigation matter. And in order to hopefully encourage settlement, I agreed to that and had Brian take a second look at it. Brian, when we came to the board, agreed that there were issues with the plans that would indicate that this engineer in this case had overstepped her level of what she likely understood for these architectural plans. One of the ways we knew that was there was quite a multitude of commentary from the codes officials on these plans. Ultimately, this engineer worked with codes, was able to get the buildings and the plans finalized, approved, and everything has been constructed. However, Brian also noted similar deficiencies. At that presentation, Brian really didn't necessarily indicate that he didn't think it was incompetent or negligence, and so we ultimately, as a board, held to the original penalty of $6,000 and no change. Afterwards, in order to start moving towards hiring an expert witness, I asked very pointed legal questions of Mr. Tibbs to explain where exactly in the plans do you see deficiencies and how do those meet incompetence and gross negligence. And after we sat down and really had that rigorous discussion, Brian informed me that he didn't think that the errors rose to those legal limits, that while he would not have performed them, that there were clearly errors, that to label them legally incompetent or legally grossly negligent, he had a hesitation doing that in writing. At that point, I spoke with opposing counsel about that issue and what we needed to do. From a legal perspective, the next step for me would be to hire an expert witness. That would be our final reviewer who would come before the hearing. However, prior to engaging in that, now that we have this kind of strange, ultimately I have a board member telling me one thing and another saying another, and we end up in a place where the penalty isn't supported by the last reviewer's conclusion anymore. So I wanted to bring it back after speaking with the opposing counsel about some of the issues, not all of the issues. After I discussed with them some of the details we wanted to point out, the opposing counsel made a formal request that this be closed on a letter of warning. I want to say that the reason that I think that could be, for this board, a reasonable settlement of this matter is really when you compare this case to case 4 you looked at today. In this case, we've met with respondent in person. This individual clearly did make errors on these plans, but this is not someone who is knowingly try to circumvent codes. They work quite closely with codes. The codes office in that city gave personal recommendations for this individual. This individual is not doing this anymore, I tell you that. It's been quite an ongoing saga since 2016, working with her attorney. The amount of money I'm sure she spent at this point is quite severe. And she is quite adamant that she wasn't incompetent or negligent, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that this complaint came from a competitor that I've learned they have quite a contentious relationship in this community. That's not to excuse the errors. I think that she acknowledged to Brian in person that what happened with the building was it was supposed to be a single level, each entry having an elevation, and then when she went to the build site, she realized the contractor had built it differently than what the build design said, and ultimately a staircase had to be added after the fact, and she had never done that before. I think at that point we can all agree that's when she should have engaged an architect or admitted that she had stepped outside her area of competence. And so I don't think anyone's saying there wasn't an error here, but this is one of those situations where the board is well within their authority. And I would recommend just a reduction in penalty to be more in line with the action, considering the number 4 case with a $3,000 penalty I feel like is quite more egregious than this case, and the $6,000 penalty seems quite high. But I do know that that's not likely to result in the settlement of this case. At the end of the day, because of the question on whether we're to a legal bar of incompetence and gross negligence, we will likely proceed to a hearing and the expenses associated with that. Again, that is your duty is health, safety, welfare. I only add litigation costs as a consideration, so that's not for you to necessarily have to hinge your decision on. But I do believe in this case we don't have a person who we'll see again for these errors, and because of that, I felt comfortable, and because it was a formal request and I have to, I wanted to bring this settlement to the board, and I didn't feel uncomfortable at least saying that I would support the case being closed on a warning. I know Brian Brian looked at these, but I know it's been a while for Rick, but I know that he had quite passionate thoughts about those stairs, and I don't know if you remember them or not, or if he wanted to add anything to it. But Rick has looked at the plans and can speak a little bit to the deficiencies that were there, if he remembers. I'm sorry about that. I thought Brian was going to be here since he's been my more active reviewer. But that's where we're at on this case. And they also said that they would be willing to put their license in a probationary status if that was wanted, where another case came up that that case could be combined with this one. So throw that out there. So that's a lot, but it's a long case with a long history. So whatever you all would like to do, I defer to you.
Do you want to say something?
I do want to say something. I reviewed this case for several weeks and looked at all the information and looked at the multiple submissions to the fire marshal's office, all the comments. Circumventing the code is, if you have the wrong code listed on your drawings, that happens. But having several wrong codes and not knowing how to design per the code as an architect designs per the code. For a 2-story building that was submitted to the fire marshal's office, not a 1-story building, that was submitted to the fire marshal's office. There were errors in the circulation, in the egress. If I remember correctly, excuse me if I'm wrong here, but I do remember that the structural, and this is a structural engineer, had not coordinated the structure with the architectural portion of the building, which is what an architect does with an engineer. That's why we are licensed in our disciplines, and it was just and that statement bothers me tremendously. That was a 1-story building, then it was a 2. That's the first time I've heard that, and I have a hard time believing that, quite frankly.
Okay.
this is one of those deals where, gee, I should ask for forgiveness and not for permission, because I practice outside my area of expertise. This is a 2-story residential building that's supposed to house students. I mean, come on. This is something that I cannot overlook, and I'm sorry that she feels the way she does, but I don't support this recommendation. The reason we deferred it back to the fire marshal was to find out if there were any other complaints, and if there are not, that's fine. But this complaint stands on its own 2 feet, and I will not support this recommendation, and I will make a motion if I need to after the conversation or at this particular point in time. My motion will be to uphold the previous disciplinarian or discipline. How does it say it? My recommendation would be to uphold the previous penalty. So I don't buy this. That doesn't hold water in my case. Sorry. So.
Well, we've got a motion on the floor first. I need a second.
A second.
All right. Now we can have some discussion.
Rick, do you, in your opinion, based on your review, do you feel like this design does rise to the level of incompetence and negligence?
I do. I mean, if an architect did this, I would be very upset with an architect. But an engineer saying that they know this particular product well enough to be an architect, and they don't, come on. It just doesn't fly. And just to make a point about going back to the legal, if we dismiss everything we do because it's going to cost a little money to get a witness or something,
Oh, no, it's not.
why even review the cases?
Well, that's not, obviously we're happy to do that. It's just one part of what this is one of the arguments from opposing counsel on a formal settlement that I'm bringing to the board. So I'm never going to tell you that.
No, I know you're not, but I'm just saying that assumption that you're going to scare me into, you're not going to prosecute because it's going to cost you money, or you're not going to investigate because it's going to cost you money, that doesn't fly. I mean, I understand you had to report that, but I'm offended by that. I truly am. And before you get another witness, and I'm not sure if Mr. Waxter can review it, maybe he should review it as well.
If we do that, we won't be able to prosecute the case. So
Well,
we
then
will
we
be
should get
hiring
an
an outside
outside.
expert.
Okay.
Yes, and
All
that is absolutely our plan next step.
Okay.
If this didn't settle anyway, so that is no problem. We're really just putting it back on the tracks where we were at. There's no problem at all.
So my recommendation or motion stands.
We have a motion. We have a second. We were in discussion. Susan.
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment, Sarah.
Of course.
Your thoughts on the respondent saying they'll never do this again doesn't hold, because number 4 said the same thing, because I was chairman at the time when this case was brought up. He was very clear he would never do any of that stuff again, and here we are. So please don't use that as an argument. I don't think it's valid, and
But to be fair, she didn't. She just was repeating.
It's relaying.
well, okay.
Yes.
All right, that's true. But I'm sorry, I just don't see that
Sure.
is something that we need to hear, because it happens
Sure.
over and over. Thank you.
Kathy.
I'm just really disturbed by the fact that Brian can't be here, because we got two
Yes.
different, very different.
I almost wanted to pull this off when I saw he was leaving.
Yeah, I would we entertain an amendment to delay until the next meeting when Brian can be here for discussion? I feel bad about not, if his findings were so different.
Can I enter into the record a written?
Well, on his way out, I think he said he shared information
Yes,
with
That's right.
you. So I think that's
Should I
appropriate.
read this into the record?
I think that's
And
legitimate.
if it's
Yes.
the pleasure of the board to
Yeah, I think
delay it,
that's
that's fine.
legitimate.
But
Absolutely.
Brian said I have to leave. In essence, my issue with the respondent was to stay in their lane of expertise. They are not a registered architect, so if they are presented this type of project, they should hire a registered architect. I think that's fairly specific to his feelings.
Yes, and that's what he
Now,
put in his
I'll be
written
glad
report.
to defer if you so wish.
Well, the only reason is because you said it's clearly gross negligence, and you represented that Brian said that he would not say it was.
Right.
And that's going
why
to be
we're-
a big deal in a legal proceeding.
Correct. Which, we'll hire an outside expert. They will
Right.
write a report that and we will go with what they tell us. That's how that usually works. But that's really the reason I even entertained another settlement is I've never been in the position, honestly, where I've had a conflicting review.
And if he were here and he said, no, upon second thought, it really is, then I just feel bad he can't speak for what his interpretation of everything was if on the record it says that it's dramatically opposite of what you think. That's kind of hard.
My motion stands. You can, whatever.
Okay, we got a motion and a second, and we are having a discussion. Any more discussion on the topic?
So what's the motion again?
Could you repeat the motion, please?
The motion is that we uphold the original recommendation, which was, and I'll find it here in an hour or two, assessing a civil penalty of $6,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. $6,000 for the incompetence statute was the original recommendation. Mm-hmm.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion presented by Mr. Thompson say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. I knew that when I brought this, I would be ending our relationship on a not as fun note. So I appreciate you entertaining. I appreciate you entertaining that with me, and I know it's stressful, and we really appreciate your patience as we move through that case, and know that we're moving it diligently, despite the fact that it's old. It's just been a lot of negotiating. So.
Well, on behalf of the board, Sarah, Godspeed, good luck.
Thank you.
I have a friend of mine who's an investigator for a school system, and all I can say is the text messages for the education system can sometimes be a dark place. So,
Yes.
Hopefully you won't get involved in too
Thank
much
you.
of that.
The day I accepted my job, my friend responded by only sending me news stories of recent, very scandalous lawsuits involving the school system. So it should be an adventure.
Thank you for your service to the board.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You didn't end on a negative note with me.
I knew it.
I knew that.
it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, me and Rick, it's going to be bad.
He's old and can outrun him. Don't worry. All right. Oh, hello. Here we go. Okay, our next. Do we have one more item in the legal case report?
No, that is the last one. We're on to the rules that Ashley will handle, and they are on page 18 on your iPads.
Okay, so and the reason I asked
Yes.
that, there was a opinion from Anthony. Was that part of the legal report, or does that come somewhere else?
So that is later.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's later.
okay,
That's
sorry about
later.
that. All right. Rules, page 18 of your iPad.
All right, it's my understanding that Tony has been working on this rule with y'all from before I was appointed as program. The proposed amendment here to rule 0120-01-.03 parentheses 1 is to allow a person gaining practical experience in an office of a practicing architect to use the title, appellation, or designation architectural associate. Specifically, it would be adding item F, which in specific language provides any person gaining practical experience in an office of a practicing architect may use the title, appellation, or designation architectural associate. There is a regulatory flexibility addendum and a regulatory flexibility analysis that I will go through, and then I will need y'all to do a roll call vote at the end as to whether to approve this regulatory flexibility analysis and addendum.
All right, do we discuss this language, or is this, do we wait to the very end to do that? Is there any discussion, or we?
I think you can go ahead and discuss it now before we go through the regulatory flexibility analysis.
I just want to make sure, because I didn't want us to get all the way through and somebody have a question and we could have traveled down that path before. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I believe my memory serves me correctly. This item was accidentally deleted or removed from the previous submittal for consideration, and this is the same language that was in that one we approved months ago. So I just want to let
You all are okay
we
with
we are
everything?
fine with it.
Everything's
It was just
Okay.
accidentally deleted from what was submitted.
I got you.
This is a housekeeping measure, I believe. Would that be?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now that you said that, I remember. I just
Okay, just, all right, thank you.
y'all tend to get a little antsy about that stuff. So that's what makes. Very good. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, first I'll discuss the 6 items in the regulatory flexibility addendum, which is in your packet of materials. The first question is the type or types of small businesses and an identification and estimate of the number of small businesses subject to the proposed rule that would bear the cost of or directly benefit from the proposed rule. The amendment to Rule 0120-01-.03, one would affect small businesses which employ any person gaining practical experience in the office of a practicing architect. The rule would directly benefit those small businesses by allowing persons to gain practical experience to refer to themselves as architectural associates. And the title is projected to decrease confusion among the public. Currently in Tennessee, there are around 1,900 registered architecture firms, around 4,500 registered engineering firms, and around 200 registered landscape architects firms. The majority of these would be considered small businesses in Tennessee, and thus would benefit from the rule amendment. Item number 2 is projected recording, record keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance with the proposed rule. There is no projected recording, record keeping, or other administrative costs associated with the amendments to the rule. Next item is a statement of the probable effect on impacted small businesses and consumers. The probable effect on impacted small businesses and consumers for the amendment would be less confusion regarding the knowledge and skills of those working towards registration as a licensed architect. Persons gaining practical experience under a registered architect may obtain more jobs with the title architectural associate than with the previous title of intern architect, as much as the public does not understand the education and skills required to obtain this previous designation. Fourth item is the description of any less burdensome, less intrusive, or less costly alternative methods. These changes would not be burdensome, intrusive, or costly, and as such, there do not appear to be any alternatives that would reasonably be expected to be less burdensome. Here, number 5, comparison of the proposed rule with any federal or state counterparts. This rule does not have any federal or state counterparts. And 6, analysis of the effect of the possible exemption of small businesses from all or any part of the requirements contained in the proposed rule. Exemption from these rules would not be expected to be beneficial for small businesses, as uniformity among the profession is important to maintain consistency in the quality of work performed by licensed engineers, architects, and landscape architects. All expected effects would be positive for small business. The next item is the regulatory flexibility analysis, which has 7 items, listed therein. I can read these into the record if y'all prefer, or you can consider them, review them, and ask me any questions, or let me know if you have any issues.
Take just a second and review those as a board, and then ask any specific questions that you might have from the response. It's additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee. Questions? No. That's it, isn't it?
Right, yeah, so...
I mean, that's the process, okay.
Yes, and then I'll need the board to move to adopt these items to move forward in the process. And it will need to be a roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to adopt as per legal's recommendation.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, now let's have a roll call.
Susan Ballard,
Aye.
Robert Campbell,
Aye.
Ricky Berside,
Aye.
Fred Minshew,
Aye.
Blair Parker,
Aye.
Brian Tibbs, Rick Thompson,
Aye.
Frank Waxter, Kathy Ware.
Aye.
Passes with 2 absent.
Okay. Now we have on page, is it 27? 26. That's just the, explanation of why we just did what we did.
The flexibility. Was that the motion, Rick? The motion that we just voted on was to adopt the flexibility?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Wasn't clear.
Yes, that's all we got to do at this point is just the motion on the flexibility analysis and addendum.
Okay. So that gets us done with the legal case report and the rules, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to, I saw one person get up about 11 o'clock, so let's take about a 10-minute and try to get back here about 15 after. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thank you.
I think we're ready to roll.
Record pace.
You're all set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Roxanne, I think you're up with director's report, and I believe it begins on page 29 of our iPad.
Thank you. You're absolutely correct. We're on 29, and the first thing before you is 3 pages of the complaint information. So the first one that you're looking at is has our total complaints for all of the different, starting with engineers, architects, and these are in date order. So the 2016 case that was just presented by Sarah would be the first one there, all the way to anything recent that we've just received at the bottom. And then the aging column is the very last one. So I'll let you take a look at those in case you have any questions. The second page, and I did email this to everyone on the board to take a look at ahead of time if you wanted to have me drill down any further. The second page on the complaints that I added has those statistics, if you will, of our timeliness and metrics, and it's 1 month as compared to the other, and that has the counts and so forth. So within the architects and engineers, we have 120 in December, and then November was 91. So that's the total number, and we are within the ideal metric of being above the 97%, turning them around within 180 days. So those are our counts. And then the last page on the complaints are the letters of caution or letters of administrative complaints that we open for CE reasons and so forth. And those get closed automatically, but we do motion them on the record to be approved to be closed. And during the month of January are all those listed that we just opened.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, having the information there lets us kind of make sure that we're staying on track with where we are and moving things forward. And in line with that, any upcoming litigation that we may be hearing as a board in the next 6 months or so, or do we know that for any?
We wouldn't. If we had any cases that consent orders were not signed and going toward litigation, probably be our older ones. The 2016 case that Sarah presented, as you saw, is the oldest one here. And if you go to page 29, the description column tells you where that case is sitting. So that would, I think, Robert, answer your question. Anything you see under formal charges authorized, that's the stage that complaint is under. So those could potentially go before a formal UN and administrative law judge.
Okay. So we've got 3 of those in that.
Correct.
Have that possibility.
Have that possibility.
Okay.
Yes,
Very good.
yes. So I do need a motion for the ones on page 31, if we could.
All right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Any questions on the letter of caution? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the ayes have it. And again, make sure that the record states, I think Grant Minshew had to leave early. I don't think that impacts our quorum, but just to make sure that there was no, somebody looking around for his whatever on that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
On the complaints, the only other thing I want to add, hopefully this week, if not by middle of next week, all the executive directors will be looking at a Tableau complaint report. I know I've sort of mentioned the changes in different complaint reports and what we can use our system for. So complaints now by the public, by another competitor in your industry, anyone can be filed or are filed online. Anyone that accesses through our link on how to file a complaint, they're actually creating the full complaint. They're going to get a complaint number, a summary. It's not a debate. The complaint's open, and then we proceed how we've always done it. But the good thing with this next piece of these Tableau reports are, I think we're closer to what Kathy talked about and Kathy's wanting, which is something that can have the information as a direct, quick link within each program, maybe even a link to the organizations, whatever we see that are about the complaints once they're closed and resolved, once they are available to the public. Going back to something that Robert sort of said, those complaints that are going to be closed or that are for something you forgot that aren't really going to be a complaint, that's what the meeting's about, and we can close them. But once they are resolved and the board's made a decision, they're part of the disciplinary action report, which is cumbersome to look at. This other report, I'm hopeful, is going to be much better, and it's going to be just our profession, and so we'll then be able to hope maybe even in the April meeting, get you to look at it, let me know what you like or don't like about it, and that's the report that we're going to be able to put out there, whatever that is. A direct link on our website, organizations, however you think that link would help protect the public. Okay. On the next page, Page 32 has the updated January numbers, and I think, if not April, definitely for the June meeting, I'll be updating the firms. We had discussed that the firm numbers are a little bit harder to track and update, and so I haven't been doing those every single meeting, but those will get updated soon as well. So you've got numbers for January as opposed to November, so there's a trend from 2016, 2017, and then 3 different meetings from the 2018 and 2019 meeting with all of our different numbers. These numbers include your active as well as those that are in an expired grace period. But anyone that has retired or gone inactive, those numbers are not here. Okay. On page 33, you have the financial for this month with, as we mentioned, some lines for bigger cost back items estimated. They're finalized when we close the fiscal year, but I think you can see that the last 2 months now are more of our normal trend. We don't have those big items that were expense, such as the computer updates and so forth. So we are right now at $104,075 so far in this fiscal year, with 5 months left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're halfway through. I don't see anything of concern as far as changes. The 2 months that we knew and talked about were going to be pretty heavy have hit. I think we're leveling off now. We're going to have some expense reimbursements coming up, but nothing that historically hasn't taken place.
Blair?
Roxana, this form includes landscape architecture.
Yes, this is all 4 of our professions.
Could you add landscape architecture to the title, please? Where it shows architects, engineers, interior designers?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't even noticed the top, but yes, we don't prepare those, but absolutely, that'll help realize it's all 4 of them.
Questions on financials? All right, very good, thank you.
You are welcome. The next 2 pages are part of the financial. They are a breakdown of the complaints that, again, once they're paid, they become part of the disciplinary action report. The consent order is paid for you to be able to see, so I added that. And the last page just has a breakdown of the different expense lines that were totaled on the first one in case you want to review. And otherwise, I'll be happy to, that is all that I had for my pieces. Turn it over to Mr. Thompson on something he's, I think, very happy to share and just done a great job with. So,
as a little background for this, I think you will remember for the past several meetings we've been discussing that NCARB will be here in Nashville March 6th, 7th, and 8th, and we are celebrating our 100th anniversary of NCARB. And NCARB was founded in Nashville, Tennessee. I don't remember how many architects. There's several architects, but they met at the Hermitage, which there's been a lot of things done at the Hermitage, as we all know, and discussed starting the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. So NCARB was founded in Nashville, Tennessee, 100 years ago. So I have it written down, so I can't tell you.
Repeat the question. Do you know who the founding fathers were? For the
as politics go today, I have it written down. So no, I don't. Yes, I do, but I don't have it with me. But anyway, so NCARB had requested. We had offered, Roxana and I had talked about this, and we had offered any assistance that we might be able to do. They have a very thorough planning committee, so they did come back to us, 2 weeks ago, I think, and requested that we get a proclamation from the governor expressing appreciation or celebrating the anniversary. And Roxana Carter and I kind of took the lead on that. And I'd love to give the state some credit. We requested this, and it's got a 3-week period on there, and we got it in about 5 days. And that was over the weekend counting too. So can I read?
Did all that? So yes, thank you again.
All right, but I had some help, or we couldn't have done this. Yeah. should I read this? Can I read this into the record? This is the standard proclamation of which you've all seen, but it's pretty good. It's pretty special. It's whereas the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, NCARB, was founded in Nashville, Tennessee on May the 2nd, 1919 to facilitate licensure and safeguard the public. And whereas NCARB has been the bedrock of support for architectural licensure for the past 100 years, and whereas in collaboration with its state licensing board members, the organization has upheld its mission to protect the health, safety, and welfare of individuals in and around the built environment throughout its rich history. And whereas the programs and services developed by NCARB and adopted by its members have set national standards for the regulation of architects, including those practicing in the state of Tennessee. And whereas NCARB has created a community of service and collaboration within the field of architecture and its related professionals to the benefit of the public. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lee, Governor of the State of Tennessee, do hereby proclaim May 2nd, 2019 as a day to honor the 100th anniversary of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, NCARB. And we are having one of these framed for to be hung in the office in Washington, D.C., which we will present to NCARB at our meeting in March. So I'd like to thank the governor and our great staff here for helping secure this. So we're very honored to have NCARB founded in Tennessee. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Very good information and good work with everybody. It's an honor to have something like that the state and the city are known for. So very good. Any comments? Good. All right.
I could add
I
didn't want to skip it and then forget. So Mr. Thompson has been wonderful in using his artistic ability to get it framed. I would need a motion for the board for us to be able to reimburse him, because that's outside of the normal items that we do.
Is that motion, is that like $1.50 or? Because we know where he gets these frames.
Did he do this in Bermuda?
We're not allowed to travel outside the 50 states.
All right, so I need a motion.
I will make the motion that we reimburse Mr. Thompson for the framing cost, and not framing in terms of,
A second.
Second. Any questions? Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Rick, for taking the lead on that. That's a good deal. All right. We now have committee reports. So, Alton, you're up.
Yeah. In a classic example of inefficient leadership, we had a marathon meeting yesterday. My first as chairman of this committee, and hopefully the last time we'll go through this exercise at this level. But we had a number of items. We had a presentation by a PE registrant from South Africa. The registration was in South Africa, requesting information on their path to licensure in Tennessee. NCAAS had determined that there were deficiencies in the educational curriculum, and we discussed this for what seemed like a really long time with a lot of input, valuable and good input from all the members of the engineering committee and Roxana and Ashley, and we think we came to a conclusion on what she may need to do in order to be able to become registered or licensed in the state. We reviewed 8 applications. All of them had various complexities and or questions associated to them. We came to resolutions on all 8, including our first ever Fresh Start Act analysis and the accompanying justification statement, which I'm going to blame Ashley for the marathon event. That took about 6 hours. Not really, but it was long.
But as the chairman, let me say that Ashley is only
protecting our
allowing
interests.
us to do that because there was a law passed that she has, or that she has to enforce, and we had to do that. So,
As a result of that, we named Ashley MVP for the meeting yesterday. It was significant. Anyway, we also addressed, we think, we had a question related to the state's National Flood Insurance Program. The issue revolved around the roles and responsibilities of a surveyor versus an engineer. We think we gave direction on where we thought those obligations began and ended for surveying. Kathy provided an update on the development of the model law. I think she is forming, I guess, or assembling a committee that will include, I believe, Blair and Frank, correct? So that we can make sure that whatever we adopt in the model law doesn't conflict in any way with what the landscape architects or the architects may have in their model law. And I think we were trying to determine how many states actually had model law right now for engineering. We think there's somewhere around 36 out of the 50 states, Kathy.
Let me give you so I sat here and counted them all. There's actually Tennessee being one of 6 states that do not actually define engineering. This is not model law. This is definition of engineering, which is a subset of model law. But one of 6 that do not specifically define engineering, but when referenced in bigger documents such as NSPE's document of summarizing how every state approaches the definition of engineering, they define engineering as who can practice, and therefore they refer to the definition of an engineer. So the number was bigger than 36. It is about 46 plus Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia. So it's a much bigger number than I had referenced yesterday, so I wanted to make sure I corrected that. And then also, Susan, do you want to be a part of that? I don't think you were here at our last meeting when we talked about.
let's talk about the specifics when we get to that topic.
Okay, whatever. But I also brought in today, and I would like to have read into the record, not read in, but referenced for the record, I brought in the draft document that I am going to use as a starting point for that definition of engineering, which is quite lengthy, as you can see. But thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. We also briefly discussed decoupling, and we understand that Casey has assembled a committee, or is in the process of finally assembling the committee and getting it together. I think Casey's gone, but that will meet sometime soon to start the process of considering and looking at all of the virtues and non-virtues of decoupling. The committee will obviously come back to their associations for recommendations and ultimately make a presentation, I suppose, to this board. Our chairman will be attending the 2019 NCAAS Board President's Assembly in Atlanta this weekend. Maybe beer involved, I don't know.
Probably not.
But the task is to address issues or concerns that either the member board administrators or the board chairs experience. And then finally, Roxana updated us that there is new software about to be rolled out, new software program that provides a direct link, I believe, for board members for application reviews, so that it will shortcut a lot of the things that the current board members have to do in reviewing applications for new applicants or reapplications. And after a marathon meeting, that's all my report.
All right, very good. Any questions? All right.
Robert, if I could.
Go ahead, sure.
The meeting for the engineers ended up with one follow-up requested of Wanda, and I handed each of the 5 engineering committee members an update. I don't know if you've had a chance to review and if this is going to change the recommendation, and this would be on Naguib, I believe is his last name. Is there anything that we want to change or leave alone, and this additional piece did not add anything as you need it for the reference, I believe, was the issue.
So, and I'll get to you just a second out, but my understanding is that we found his lack of PE supervision to be deficient, correct? In my opinion, this bolsters our opinion. So
I agree with that. Well, we were looking for some substantiation that he actually did have practice under the direct supervision of a licensed professional, and so we asked Wanda to reach out on our behalf to find out whether or not that was the case for one other particular individual that had worked with him, and as it turns out, that's not the case, and I agree with Robert that will not alter the decision or recommendation of the board, or the committee, I'm sorry.
That's what I needed.
Yeah, we just
Thank
nodding
you.
of heads, I think we're in agreement. Thank you for, tell Wanda, thank you for getting that together for us so quickly. All right. And thank you, Alton, for the report. I know yesterday was a long day, and again, the analysis we had to go through was new, and it's cumbersome, and some of the decisions that we have to make, it's good that you go through some of that analysis to make sure that you're going down the right path. So I appreciate the spirit it was put in. I wish they could have done it in a few less steps, but whatever.
For the record, thank you, Ashley, for leading us through that process. Your knowledge and the way you were able to expedite that was, we all significantly appreciate you and what you did. Thank you.
All right, Architect Committee. Oh, wait a minute. That's one person.
It'll be short and sweet, Mr. Chairman. We had a good meeting this morning. We basically we talked about initial application submittals and how we could streamline those, and primarily architectural and landscape architecture. And Wanda presented us with a list of items. They're on your pad. I don't remember where, but I have, I think, 15 or more here that we discussed. Primarily, it was duplication of records that was submitted to us as architects by NCARB, and how we asked them to put them on our state applications. And since we're accepting NCARB, it was not, we didn't feel like it was necessary. Some things we left on, and majority of them we deleted. And we will have a follow-up report, I believe, at the next meeting. Or
Yes, sir. Anything that we are in doubt, and anything that, as we rolled out, we had more questions, we'll bring back. Those that we're able to delete, I'm very clear on. Since 3 of us took notes and we'll refer back to the video, I think we're good to go ahead and move.
Right, so that was our discussion. It was a very, very good discussion. Actually, it was, I think we took about a full hour to go through all that, so it's very well vetted. I think that proclamation, which we just went over, I think that was pretty much what we covered today, minor miscellaneous items. But that's my report, Mr. Chairman. So
Good. And before I get to you, I want to go ahead and, again, we ignore the landscape committee, but at the same time, so it was a joint meeting.
Yes.
And there's
sorry.
anything that they want to add to that, and I
Not sure we'll add anything to that. We certainly went through and tried to clean things up with regard to the application, which I think is fantastic. So it was a very worthy session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Blair. Interior Design Committee,
Yes.
which may get the record for the shortest meeting of a committee of it, and so I yield the throne
Yes.
to you.
2 women efficient in getting it done.
And
So
Susan, that's on page 37 for everybody's iPad, for those of you that didn't
what's
bring
on page
the
41 of
definition.
mine? So
Oh,
okay.
Well, it's 37 at the bottom if you'll tap it.
Oh, you're right.
Okay.
You're right.
So, as I had reported back in December, the CIDQ had put together a task force of 8 members from across the country to come up with a more current definition of interior design, which was released to the public this week. I think they sent out 50,000 emails and notices. So what I would like to present is that we, as a committee, would like for our there to be an amendment to 012-04-.01 under definitions, the abbreviated definition for interior design. And I will read it. Interior design encompasses the analysis, planning, design, documentation, and the management of interior, non-structural, non-seismic construction and alterations of projects in compliance with applicable design and construction, fire, life safety, and energy codes, standards, regulations, and guidelines for the purpose of obtaining a building permit as allowed by law. Qualified by means of education, experience, and examination, interior designers have a moral and ethical responsibility to protect the consumers and the occupants through the design of code-compliant, accessible, and inclusive interior environments that address well-being while considering the complex physical, mental, and emotional needs of people. This does not designate residential or commercial, but is a general definition and a greater explanations beyond that. So the committee would like to bring before the board that we adapt this definition of interior design into our TCA book.
All right, very good. Are there any questions for Susan? Okay. I've adopted this definition, so it doesn't. This is not something that's voted on. It's the national definition.
So basically, it's housekeeping for us.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I may have a silly question. So the definition on page 37, which is coming from the organization, that abbreviated, did you say that you wanted us to add this to our statute? Okay. I'll use it.
The statute and not a rule, correct?
Well,
or you're wanting a rule?
I'm looking at definitions here. So if there's a better place for it, that's fine with me. We just need to determine.
Are you looking at definitions under the rules or definitions under the statutes?
Rules of Tennessee State Board of Architecture and Engineering Examiners, Chapter 012-04, Interior Designers. On page 4, January 2017, revised.
We would have to have a rulemaking to have that adopted and all that process then. Okay. Yeah, it's a statute would mean we'd have to go to the legislature and get that added.
Rules.
Yeah.
So this is the only book I know about. Is there another one? So.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just since you brought that up, you're working on your definitions currently, and we are in the process of trying to do our definitions too, because we were kind of waiting on everyone to get on the same page. So would that be something that we could all, if we do that, we would do all that at one time? It
would be my thought and opinion, but that is my opinion, because if we have too many rules in the pipeline to be reviewed and come back and forth, and having been at different GovOp meetings last year a lot for different programs, it can get very confusing if you've got several things regarding A&E or just the architects or just so. If we're close, now I know the engineering definition pieces are going to take a while, so then it would be your decision. Do we start a rulemaking piece to just impact the definition for the interior designs and wait on the others, or do we try to do all the definitions at the same time?
And I think all those are valid points, and maybe let's look at that in next month's meeting. And the reason I say that is kind of give us a time frame of what we're talking about, because we always have to have our memory refreshed on how long this process takes, when we have to go do certain things, and hopefully by then, as we talk about the definition of engineering, maybe we can kind of understand some of the time frame that's going to take too, and approach it with a little bit of time data in it too. If it's going to take 2 years to do the definition of engineering, certainly I think that can be a standalone going through. But if we think this is something that can be done in 6 months, then that's another discussion. So anyway, but let's wait till next meeting to kind of look at the formal rulemaking part of that. We just don't want to, because we've had several in the pipeline at one time, and we've gotten confused as to which one was active when. Good advice. Yes, Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the, as I went through all the different definitions for engineering, there are numerous cross-references to the incidental practice of architecture and surveying, and my thought was there's probably similar types of cross references between architecture and interior design, et cetera, as I was sitting here thinking about it. And, Susan, I totally, understand what you're trying to do, but I do feel like a more organized discussion, and I, again, would extend to you that if you'd like to be part of the definition committee, and I think you weren't at were you at our meeting last time we met? I don't think you were here because it was, Blair is on it as a landscape architect representative, Frank is the architect, myself for engineering, and I think it would be useful if you could be a part of those conversations also, so that as we all move forward and try to come up with references to one another's practice and don't define it in ways that y'all find offensive, et cetera, that would be really useful if you would be so inclined. And Frank
Is that
wasn't
on Wednesday
here.
Afternoons?
Frank was not able to be at this meeting, so he did not want to have a committee presentation without his involvement, so we're going to postpone anything until probably in the next 3 weeks, would be my guess.
Steve?
I don't think we've discussed whether or not the definitions would be in the code or the rules or not, but I think they should be in the code. If you look at other practice definitions in the state, they're in the code, and I think we would want to keep that on do that a similar fashion.
And that's good stuff, and that may make the decision easy, depending on which way we go. But we won't know that probably until next month. So let's do it then. And go ahead, Ricky.
In our committee meeting yesterday, did we end that saying that we had to make a motion today to charge the committee? Okay,
that's what we're getting ready to do.
Okay, all right.
All right, Susan, that was your only item? That's my item. Very good. Thank you for that. So let's go on into general discussion. Is that correct? We've got engineering definitions, oddly enough, are right on top of that. Yeah, so that leads us right into the next part of this. So, Kathy, I'm going to recognize you. You've kind of been spearheading this and talk about what we're going to do going forward with this. And then we do have to have a motion to formalize this subcommittee for definitions at the end of that.
All righty. Thank you, Robert. So I gave everyone a one-page handout. You should have. I put it at your desk, hopefully, as well as Roxana and Ashley. Do you have that, Ashley? Good. Okay. So this was basically a document that I drafted just for the purposes of starting the conversation with everyone so that you would understand the myriad number of topics that are covered by all the different current states that have the definition of engineering on the books. I want to start and ask you to read quickly through the first paragraph, if you haven't already done so, on the sheet of paper that says the practice of engineering is defined as. If you have a chance to read that, let me just look at me and then we'll proceed. I just want everybody to see that. All right, so if you've had a chance to digest that, I want you to understand that most of the states who, and as I said earlier, it's 45 plus, use that as the opening paragraph to define engineering. And that comes out of the NCAAS model law for the practice of engineering, the definition of the practice of engineering. I might have wordsmithed it a word or two here and there because all the different states do the same. But it is for our practical purposes of a starting point, I would suggest to you that it's probably the minimum that you could get away with and be consistent with the practice in all the other places of which many of us are licensed. If you don't do anything else and you want to have a definition, you probably need this paragraph. After that, somewhat in descending order of importance were where I saw other states had similar language. So, for instance, paragraph 2, such service or creation consist of, and it goes on to name a bunch of different stuff, including surveying is in some places. That is kind of the second most common paragraph in all the states that have a definition. So they go on to give examples of what constitutes engineering. Then beneath that, there's a big drop-off after those two paragraphs. Then most of the states become very, very different one from the other. And my thought was, as I read a bunch of them, for instance, there's one in Texas, and I'll call it up for you if you're interested, but there's one in Texas that specifically talks about something that, to me, I read it and I went, oh, they had a lawsuit of some sort. You know, there's certain states have certain words in their definition that are clearly pertinent to something that has happened in the history of that state. But after these first two paragraphs at the top, everything else is a big drop-off in terms of consistency for all the other states. For instance, the term of design coordination, the term what is engineering studies, certain exclusions. So, for instance, paragraph number 5, nothing contained in this section means to exclude maintenance, basically. It's the operator maintain equipment. The bottom one, the mere execution of, as a contractor, work designed or created by a PE shall not be considered the practice of engineering. So there's a lot of that type of stuff, and I'm just giving you those as examples. I just want you to know that there's just so many things. This is not comprehensive. There are so many things that could be covered in the practice of definition that is both inclusive and exclusive of what is not engineering. So we don't have to go through all this in great detail. Again, this is kind of a starting point for the engineers, but I'm happy to have feedback from everybody and understand, you know, how inclusive, how short we want to make it, what do we want as a starting point? How long do you want this process to take? Because I assure you it could take 2 years. Because I've talked to other people who've been involved in it, and it takes a long, long time sometimes to agree, especially because the board has turnover and people are on the board and then they're not, and new people come on and have to be educated. So I'm going to shut up, but I would really love some feedback, and I would say that I think our next step is, in the very near future, in the next 3 weeks, I'd like to convene a committee meeting, and Susan be a part of that, and then let's the 4 disciplines get something on the table that is a starting point, and meet with council and whoever we need to start pushing this rope down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, and I don't think this is going to require a motion, because I think I, as chairman, can appoint a subcommittee to do this without that. So I want to appoint Blair Parker, Susan Ballard, Frank Wagster, and Kathy Ware to work on a unified definition of the disciplines that we represent: engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design, and come back to us with the purpose of having a publicly noticed meeting next month. And I don't know how that's going to work exactly, but with the purpose of this developing the definition, and also developing a timeline on and options maybe to present to the board, so that we can plan other issues, and certainly topics like Steve brought up, whether it's in the Tennessee Code Annotated, whether it's rule, whether it's all those things need to be vetted to make sure that we have the best possible outcome for this. So if everybody's willing to agree to serve on that subcommittee, that would be my preference as chairman to going forward. But we do have to have a noticed meeting for that intent. So is it the intent to try to meet on after this board meeting? I'm trying to get some input on that.
I think Frank agreed that we would talk after this board meeting. He and I were just in terms of a schedule for when we could have that next meeting, and Roxana will set it up as a telephone conference so that people don't have to travel. And since I'm here, I'll probably come down here and be able to ask Ashley information and that kind of stuff. But it will probably be a telephone conference, and as soon as Frank tells me he's available and the others can make it, we'll have it set up. And you have to give a 24-hour notice? 48?
I think it's 72 hours
72.
notice on the board's website of any meetings, which is why ours is usually the Thursday or something before.
But we will comply with all that.
Okay, very good. Well, and so obviously Roxana will coordinate that, and telephone conference is a great way to certainly hopefully do a lot of the initial work anyway, and we can move forward. So I appreciate your willingness to work on that, because Steve's been pestering me for a long. All right, very good. So our next item, decoupling research.
I believe we have already discussed it. We haven't taken it off the agenda in case anything new comes up, but I think between what Elton presented and most importantly what Casey Anderson brought up on being done, I think that that's been covered unless the board has anything else that you want to discuss at this time regarding this.
I don't think so. I think that's moving. We do have one item, and I apologize. There is a opinion from our legal counsel on, and I didn't know exactly where that was
It
at.
starts on page 41. It was right after the definition brought forth
Yeah.
for interior design. So on page 41 of your iPads is the request that was made of Tony. And unfortunately, Tony isn't able at this point to join us. But everyone on the board got emailed his work product, which is a research of interior architecture. And then the second part was applicability to exceptions when required. So I don't know that we can answer all the questions, but it's there for your review. And
Applicability of exemptions deals with the.
okay, so the second document, which is on page 46, is the for the engineers, the exception when registered.
Go ahead.
So Tony had sent me this document in terms of the interior architecture. In general, it basically states that using the term interior architecture would imply that you are interior architect, which is not a legal term in Tennessee, and this particular individual is advertising interior architecture. So I had requested that, we have something as a basis to file a complaint against. So this is what Tony has brought back. This person did not graduate under the interior architecture program because she graduated 30 years ago. So as far as this goes, I don't know if we need to wordsmith it anymore or if it's just a general statement. And I was hoping Tony would be here so we could ask him. So at this point, I don't think we can address this unless you have any thoughts, Rick.
And what is the question to Tony? In case Ashley.
The
would
way
be-
I read this, it's stating that she graduated under interior architecture, and she did not. Okay. And then the other statement, as I understand this, is that they're using the term interior architecture, which I do not know other than the advertisements that I've seen on interior architecture. So I want to make sure that this is addressing it in a way that if we file a complaint, that we have something, to fall against. And not being a legal counsel, I can't say that one way or the other. So
I would say, I guess, and which is what I say to people what they call all day, anyone can file a complaint. So I would recommend that if you've got the information to file a complaint, that you do so online. If for some reason there is no jurisdiction for us to do this, the complaint's still going to live its course. So at that point, legal would review, present it to the full board with a recommendation of what we can and can't do. So that shouldn't change. Yep.
All right. The next one is the applicability of exemptions when registered. And I think my preference, since Tony's not here, I know Ashley, you've worked on this some too, but maybe to kind of hear the back and forth a little bit, is maybe let's do this can we do this at the engineering committee? Because I don't think there's any case that's outstanding. I mean, that there's no pending action against somebody that requires, I think it's just a question that was asked by the public. Is that right?
This was a question that y'all posed to me at the engineering committee meeting in December. And so this is just research and an answer to the question that was.
I think somebody had asked us that. Somebody had asked that question, or something. There was something that came up that precipitated us asking that question. Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, that's correct. That was a question that came, I think, to Roxana, and I think she sent it to me. And anyway, we ended up talking about it at the December meeting.
But I would just, I think, maybe all of us sitting, because there are probably some things that we need to make sure that we're all clear about. And I noticed in the exemption, while this opinion recognizes the legal result does not contemplate whether any specific exemption exists or its application. And I just think that's probably going to take some time to flesh out a little bit and think about some of those exemptions that are certainly out there, so that we can kind of have a coherent response on that. Yes, sir.
And when we discuss that in the engineer committee meeting, though, it'll include architecture too eventually, because of the same. It covers structures that meet the exemption, so the same question applies to architect sealing, or whether or not they have to seal such a structure.
Right. That makes sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Board, is that okay with everybody? Okay, very good. Well, I don't see any other items on the agenda, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, leave.
Aye.
Aye.
What? I don't want to leave. I want to stay here forever.